And Mary Beth Ferry.
Yes.
Great. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Lisa Dana,
Yes.
Keith Taverna,
Yes.
Mary Wormers.
Yes.
And I'd also like to add, we have some additional guests with us today in case questions arise and we need their expertise. We have David Lane, Director of the Danvers Department of Public Works. We have Rich Sousa, Director of Operations for the DPW. And
Yes.
if he's not on yet, I believe Mark Kaleo, Director of Public Health, will be joining us as well. So this open meeting of the Danvers School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda for this meeting on the town's website, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. For this meeting, the Danvers School Committee is convening remotely via Zoom, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured during the recording. In terms of meeting materials, all supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the district's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. In terms of ground rules,
Melissa?
we're turning first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, we have established an email address for public comment, info@danvers.org. This email address is also posted with the agenda and shown online with the streaming of this meeting. Residents will email comments and they will be provided read out loud after staff has confirmed their name and address. However, as mentioned before, we will not be reading public comments at this meeting. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Okay, just two comments I would like to make before turning things over to Dr. Dana for tonight's presentation. First of all, I just want to thank everyone that was involved with Saturday's high school graduation. It turned out to be just an incredible day. The class of 2020 really wanted the opportunity to celebrate together as a class. And thanks to Dr. Dana, Mr. Taverna, and Mrs. Wormers, especially Dr. Colombino and Mr. Emberley at the high school, with support from Dr. Gerard, Mr. DeMauro, the high school staff, the DPW that did so much, they got what they requested. It was far from a typical graduation, but it was a great day, and I'm sure it will be something that they will remember for quite a long time. So thank you very much for everyone involved. Secondly, we find ourselves here tonight to talk about a very unique and unprecedented situation. No matter what decisions are made, there will be people that are unhappy. In my 8.5 years on this committee, I, and I'm sure my colleagues, have received by far more emails about this topic than any other. I want to thank everyone that took the time to write. I tried to respond to as many as possible, but by the time late morning came today, I just simply ran out of time. So I apologize to those I didn't get to. Um, I will say that almost all the emails I received were very respectful, supportive, and understanding of this challenge. Because of the number of questions and the volume of information and misinformation, the central office administration compiled a list of frequently asked questions that were issued yesterday and continue to add to them, and they continue to add to them as they respond to questions that came in after people had a chance to read the plan. My understanding is that there'll be an updated frequently asked questions document posted tomorrow. We took this approach due to the sheer volume of emails with questions and felt this was a better way for the administration to gather the information and have time to answer them appropriately instead of trying to answer them on the fly in real time. So I'll end my remarks by saying that I know without a doubt that the 5 people that serve on the Danvers School Committee have the best interest of everyone involved in the Danvers School District, and we will make decisions as we always do with a student-centered approach. So before I turn things over to Dr. Dana, does anyone else on the committee want to make any brief statements? All right, I can't see you all, but I don't hear anyone. So Dr. Dana, please take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. This evening for our presentation, Keith Taberner and Mary Wormers and I will be providing an overview with our recommendation for a reopening plan. We will then be able to explain the 3 parts of our reopening plan, talk more about the frequently asked questions that we've been put together, and that will be an ongoing process, and then talk with you about next steps and then open it up back to the school committee. And then the second part of our meeting is to vote on some policies that are also part of this process. So at this time, I ask Mary Wormers to share her screen with the presentation for the community. Okay, thank you, Mary. So we begin, this is around the next steps. We were here last Thursday and gave a preliminary report and leaning toward the hybrid model. So tonight we'll talk about a report now that is been compiled with many details as part of it. We want to begin with saying again where we started off the last school year, working together for all our students. As Mr. Thompson said, that is what we continue to see. So Mary, the next slide has again the many committee members from our reopening to our administrative council to the teaching and learning and the SEL subcommittee. These members of our community have put in countless hours over this summer to get us to this point and will continue their work with us through the opening of school. So I appreciate everyone's efforts and their commitment to this process. Next, we want to bring you through, again, looking at where we are as a state, and everyone wants to see the return of students to school and looking at our schools as a vital part of our students' education and having them in schools. But that is a process for us to be there. So we're looking at the safe return of as many students as possible. We're continuing to look at all of the research, the medical literature, the data that is out there, the public health data. We continue to balance that with the health and safety risks with what we know about our health, the safety, the socioeconomics, and the achievement risks as we make those decisions tonight and moving forward. And we know that any approach moving forward has to be a number of strategies that come together. It's not just one strategy that will help to mitigate and lower the risk of transmission. So with that, looking at those safety and health requirements, as we continue, these continue to be the 4 major ones that, and as a society, not only in our schools, but also as we see in our everyday life, we have the face coverings that's been recommended. We are looking at the social distancing. 6 feet is the number that has been, you see that everywhere that you go, continuing to make sure that we prioritize hand washing, the hand sanitizing, along with cleaning, and then the piece of staying home when sick. So with that, that moves us into looking at where we are in Danvers as our district. So all Massachusetts districts are responsible for developing a return to school plan that has three parts: the in-person learning that has the new safety requirements, as stated earlier, a hybrid model, and then a remote learning model. And Mary will be describing those to you in just a few moments. Along with that, for families that are choosing for full remote, we will have a full remote platform. We'll talk a little bit about that. That information we did not get until yesterday from the Department of Education. So we do still need more time to flesh out that plan and provide that so we could give the school committee more of an update at our next meeting. Okay, so looking at the next slide, with that, for families that are choosing for full remote, I'm not sure why I can hear myself at the moment from before, but I'm going to continue. I think we're okay now. A reminder of the process with the Department of Education. It is a two-step process. We submitted the preliminary plan on July 31st that we were leaning toward the hybrid model after last Thursday's school committee. And then tonight is the next vote for finalizing our district reopening plan. It was August 10th, which is this coming Monday. Today, the commissioner has sent out, and I believe it went on the desktop this afternoon. We had a phone call or a Zoom meeting with the commissioner, superintendents, and central office staff at noontime today. The new date is August 14th to get the final plan to the Department of Education and then to have it posted on our website. And looking at that, we have the next slide has the parts, which again is listed it's on our website. We sent to all community members as part of the Danvers Public Schools, all of our staff and parents. And again, hopefully they're minor pieces with email, but the majority of our Danvers Public Schools community received the plan yesterday. An executive summary, the letter from the superintendent, the three models, out of school learning time, the supports for students, professional learning, and the appendix with has a lot of additional information, and then a certification of health and safety requirements, which really looked at about 7 of the guidances that DESE has given that we have reviewed them and say and be able to certify that we are following through with those. So with that, the final piece for the superintendent at this moment before I turn it to Mary and Keith is our recommendation. So the Danvers Public Schools, we are recommending that we would begin the school year in a hybrid model plan. So at this point, I'd like to ask Mary to, I'll share this information, one more slide that we just added to the presentation just probably within the last hour. In our discussion with the commissioner earlier this afternoon, he did share this slide and we wanted to share it again as a state, as the education leaders of our school district in looking at the different research. This is one study from Johns Hopkins that is looking at the states that have the lower transmission rates under the 5%. And then I know there's other data that we're looking at too, a positive counts also. But this is one way of a piece of data that has been used in looking at the state and as we made this recommendation to the school committee. Thank you. So now the next step is Mary bringing us through each part of it.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Dana. So the Department of Education asked us to develop 3 different types of learning plans. The first model they asked us to do is to talk about an in-person learning. And they asked us to distance students at a minimum of 3 feet and try to see if that was a feasible learning plan for us. So we went into our schools, did a feasibility study. We found that we could bring all students back in person with a distance of 4 feet was the minimum in any of our schools that we could distance the students. Again, Danvers was not comfortable. Our administrative team was not comfortable with the 4 feet. So we really leaned towards having the 6 feet distancing that the CDC recommended. So this in-person model is not feasible for us at this time until the health and safety measures are all in place. But we did put the plan together. It looks like our traditional school schedule, but it also integrated lots of important health and safety protocols into our day. The challenges that we face with this in-person model is lunch, because we had to increase the number of lunches each day to social distance everyone with a minimum of 6 feet because they would be eating and would not have on their masks. So if we, for some of our schools, that the number of lunches that they would have would probably be most of the day. So we would really have to start to look at other large spaces like the gymnasiums or at the Holt Richmond at the multi-purpose room to have students be eating lunch without their masks on. So we're afraid that some of that may impact classes. And then another challenge was transportation, getting all of our students to school in a safe and social distance manner within our budget was going to be very challenging. If we do have the in-person learning model happening this school year, this is a sample of a schedule. This is the elementary schedule, and we wanted to show this to highlight for you that there are many breaks for mask breaks. And so it's over here it's in the green, and then over here it's in the pink that you can see that we've built in those breaks. So those were times where students would be going outside or out to the gymnasium or a large space in the school so they could go out, have a 6-foot distance from their peers and take off their masks. So this model really reflects school as we know it with those health and safety protocols. The second model that the Department of Education asked us to develop is a hybrid model, which would be a mix of the in-person and our remote model. This is the model that we're leaning towards. It allows for that 6 feet of social distancing. It also gets some of our students back so that we really are able to really work on the in-person model. So what we would do is a 2 days in-person model and a 3 days remote learning. We would split the students into 2 cohorts. On Monday and Tuesday, cohort A would be in school while cohort B is remote. We would hit Wednesday and both cohorts would be remote. And then we would have a Thursday, Friday where cohort B was in school and cohort A was working remotely. During Wednesdays, we would be looking to really intensify the small group instructions. We would have synchronous check-ins and instruction, and there would be teacher planning time built into that day. Also, we would work on Wednesdays, have deep cleaning between our cohorts. So we would be able to get the school cleaner than what we would just through the overnight time. Again, we met that 6 feet of social distancing, and we've had a few challenges, obviously childcare for both staff and family. And then we do have some staffing challenges because though we would have some kids in school and some kids learning remotely. We put together this video that we would like to show you now to show you what would it look like for the classrooms to be 6 foot distanced and the what a school bus transportation will look like.
Danvers High School has 2 main types of classrooms, science labs and regular classrooms. Each science lab accommodates 15 students with 6 feet of social distancing. We added a table to the end of each workstation to allow for 2 students to sit 6 feet apart at each workstation. We also added student desks in the middle row. For the regular classroom, we are able to accommodate approximately 15 student desks with 6 feet of social distancing. Holton Richmond Middle School classrooms accommodate 14 student desks with the 6 feet social distancing guidelines. Student desks are oriented towards the smartboards, and in order to maintain 6 feet social distancing, the first row of the students are 6 feet from the teacher presentation area at the front of the classroom. Although there are slight variations in the shape and dimension of our general classrooms, they can all accommodate 14 student desks with 6 feet social distancing guidelines. At Riverside for the 2021 school year, the largest class is 22 students. As you can see here, 11 desks fit, each 6 feet apart. Blue dots mark the location of desks at 6 feet apart. On a typical day, when weather allows, all windows in the classroom will be open for fresh air and ventilation. For the upcoming school year, buses will run at 33% capacity with only 1 child per seat, sitting on alternate sides of the rows to ensure as much distance as possible. Windows will be open at all times on the bus, and masks will be required for all students K to 12. Buses will be extensively cleaned and disinfected on a daily basis.
So we want to thank Ben from DCAT for helping putting that video together for us. But that was just a little taste of what might look like with the social distancing. So I also thought I'd share what the schedule might look like in the hybrid learning. So here's an elementary schedule. The green designates when the students are in school, and then on Wednesdays with the live SEL whole class meeting. So students come in person Monday, Tuesday. This is if you were at cohort A. On Wednesday, you would follow the schedule that's over here, which would be some synchronous and some asynchronous learning. The teacher would be pulling small groups of students to be working with. And the afternoon would be student independent working time and teacher planning time. And then cohort A on Thursday and Friday, they would be working remotely. They would be following the same schedule that they would be following in person, but they'd be watching videotape lessons, and they would be monitored. They would have synchronized time to meet with teachers and staff members to so that they can monitor the student learning throughout the day. So that's the elementary schedule. The hybrid schedule for the middle and high school look very similar. Each has its own little nuances. But what they would try to do in the hybrid schedule is get all 7 periods in the with 45 minutes, where we normally only work with 6 periods in a school day. We really want to maximize the in-person time with students. So we really want to make sure that they get to see all 7 teachers in the days that they are in school. When they also are working remotely, they would follow a similar schedule at home. And we, again, would have staff monitoring their work throughout the day when they're remote. And then Wednesdays would be, again, a model that they would be working through the schedule, and the teachers would be checking in with the whole class at certain periods in the day, each period of the day. So that is the hybrid learning model. Again, it's a combination of our in-person and our remote learning models. And finally, the third plan that we needed to put together was a fully remote learning plan that we would be able to go to, say if we start with the hybrid model, but the health and safety measures are not going in the right direction, that we needed to go to a remote, we would implement this plan. And what we were really working to do is develop those consistent routines and schedules for students, so that as we shift from a hybrid model into a remote model, those routines stay very familiar to students. Google Classroom, although used in every single model, is going to be where the students know to go and get their classwork, that they know where the communication is all happening through there. And in fact, every Google Classroom has a Google Meet link in it. And so students know when it's their time, when they're in remote learning, they would click on that link and come to be in any of the synchronous class sessions. And the older students will work on submitting their remote learning work through this. At the elementary, the K-2 level, where some of the students might not be as adept with using Google Classroom, we're going to have student work turned in or demonstrated on the synchronous learning sessions with teachers. Again, Google Meet is what we're using for our synchronous small group differentiated learning, as well as our whole class synchronous sessions. The Google Meet links are going to be right there in Google Classroom, easy for students and their families to access. We will have some asynchronous lessons available for students, and so that they are able to go back and get their instruction if they are working independently and need to be reminded about what they were learning, so they'll be able to get back to those videos. We'll also have lots of SEL check-ins. Social emotional learning is SEL. So there's gonna be a lot of that checking in, kind of working together as a class, trying to really build that learning community together. We'll also have check-ins by either the teachers and the staff at any time during the days to check to see how students are doing with completing their independent work. And then we will be checking attendance at each synchronous session. And this remote learning model is not going to look like what we had in the spring. It's going to be very different, because this remote learning model is like is happening with a schedule just like they would be in school, and there's accountability. We will be making sure that all students are turning in their work. Grades will be issued. You will find that you will be getting report cards just like you have in the past. At the elementary middle school level, we'll be having report cards at the trimester break each trimester, and at the high school, we are on a quarter method. So there will be report cards issued, grades will be happening. You can be looking into Power School at the middle and high school level to see what the grading looks like. Again, I thought I would share kind of a little picture of what the schedules would look like. This is the elementary remote learning schedule. Elementary is going to do something a little bit different during the remote learning day. They were going to split the class into half so that, for example, if we had 24 students in a class or 22 that was at Riverside, we would be working with 11 students at a time. And we would be prioritizing what we call the inner core curriculum, which would be the math and the language arts curriculum. So in this model, you'll see there's green and yellow. And so green is the time when they're working with teachers, and yellow is the time when they're doing some independent work or guided work on the computer. So you'll see that the teachers are working on our word work, like foundations and words their way. That would be live work that they would be doing with their teachers, reading workshop. Same thing, that there'll be a mini lesson that all students will see in the as a lesson, and then they would be doing independent work, but the teachers will be working with smaller groups of students on that independent work. So what we thought we would do is have one group of kids be focused work with the teacher in the morning, and then in the afternoon they'd be doing independent work, but with check-ins with staff. And then cohort B would be working in the afternoon with the teacher on the green work. So on the word study and on reading workshop. So a different model, but it's to maximize the amount of time that the student is working with the teacher and prioritizing that. Again, Wednesdays would be a day for a catch up and doing small group work, but this is a schedule that we're thinking about for that remote learning at the elementary level. At the secondary level, they're also thinking of something a little bit different. They are actually lengthening the class time during the day when it's remote. Again, the teacher wants more time because they're not in person with us, but they would like more time to work with the student. Thus, they would work every other day with a teacher in a specific class. So for example, here, the students in block A, B, C, and D would be working on one day with their teachers in a 65, 75-minute block. And every block is going to start class with the teacher. There's going to be a synchronous check-in lesson, and then students will be giving independent work. Again, just like elementary, there'll be some small group work that the teacher will engage in with the students. And then there'll be an end of class summary. So the class would all get back together again at the end of class and kind of close out the lesson. So in order to do that, we split the 7-day schedule into 2 days. And it also allows time for teacher planning and also a little directed study where, again, students can catch up with teachers if they need extra help and finish up some work that they might not have finished over the 2 days full schedule. So those were pictures of our learning models. And now I just want to say a little bit more about special populations. We talked a lot about that last week, but I really think we have to emphasize that we need to prioritize extra support for our high needs students. Some of these students fell further behind during our spring remote learning, and we really need to be working to catch those, to have those students have more support during this remote learning model. So the Department of Ed has asked us to really look at these students, and the categories will be our preschool age students, our English language learners, our IEP students, especially those with significant and complex needs, our homeless students, and our economically disadvantaged students. So we have begun to start to look at our population, and we're thinking that during the hybrid and the remote learning models, we're really trying to prioritize them to have in-person learning if at all feasible. So we will be, again, putting more plans in place for that to happen, but we realize that we have a real responsibility to make sure that we're meeting all these students' needs. And we're also going to provide weekly schedules, kind of helping with those executive functioning skills, and to communicate with families so that they understand what prioritized skills that we are working on with these students. So Dr. Dana earlier talked about the state-sponsored full remote learning alternative that we had talked about before. Just yesterday, they released the names and the options that are available through the state-sponsored program. We watched a webinar late in the afternoon, and so we need more time to digest what those models look like and what makes sense for Danvers. But we will have a model for parents to take advantage of if they want to enroll their child in a fully remote model for the school year. So at this time, I'm going to turn this over to Keith.
So we wanted to spend a few minutes talking to you about what school funding looks like for the upcoming year, because obviously that has an effect on some of the decisions we're able to make, especially around staffing. So we've been informed for Chapter 70 that will be level funded to the FY20 budget, which is good news. That fits into the budget that was passed at town meeting in May. Through the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, we were awarded $258,000. Some of that money had to go to private schools, so it was a total allotment to Danvers of $246,000 with a June 30th, 2021 spending date. And this was the federal money that we heard through the first quote unquote bailout bill that came through. So, and at this point, we actually have all of that funding available to spend during the academic year. In state coronavirus relief funds, we were given $225 per student. That totals about $781,000, but that does have an end date of December 30th, 2020, which presents some challenges as that's in the middle of our year as we look at what those funds could do to help with staffing. To date, $350,000 of that have been spent on PPE, furniture, and other needs. $150,000 more is dedicated at the moment, and then we have $250,000 available for spending. So it's about $500,000 between those two grants left available to spend with various end dates. We did apply for a remote learning technology assistance grant. We are anticipating of hearing formally from the state sometime. We were hoping at the end of last week, hopefully now early next week, but we do anticipate that we will receive some funding for the purchase of Chromebooks, which will allow us to increase our refresh rate and the quality of Chromebooks, which we're able to give to students. So our challenges when it comes to finances primarily is around the cost of substitutes and scheduling for teachers who can't return to in-person instruction. So if a teacher has a medical need, obviously we're going to grant them either a medical leave or the ability to work from home to help support students remotely if they can't safely return to the building. In an ideal world, we would like to hire a long-term sub for each of those teachers. But to date, we have about 18 staff members who cannot return. And because this will last the entire school year, the substitutes would be paid on step and scale. So even if we hired, some teachers with less experience, they would still average about $60,000 a year to hire a substitute. So the math doesn't work with that, which is where we're starting to get creative with our scheduling with our high school and middle school teams and working collaboratively with the union to think about what solutions we can come up with to help with that. Again, as we talked about the end dates of grants, when the grants end before the current academic or fiscal year, that presents a challenge of trying to front load spending. And then some of the budget statewide has been committed for the first 3 months as they continue to look at revenues, but obviously that presents a challenge for the rest of the fiscal year and what potential 9C cuts or the overall budget picture for the town looks like. And then our increased cost of transportation and our cost of PPE that we've talked about in the past. So now we just wanted to take you through some of our frequently asked questions that we've got from families. So it's kind of a summary of the document that Mr. Thompson mentioned in the beginning of the meeting. We will continually update that as we go. We would like to thank the community. We got 96 comments that came in today, and I believe over 70 from our last meeting last week. So we've done our best to, again, as Mr. Thompson said, get back to individuals, incorporate those into the FAQs, and we'll continue to update that. So for technology, Chromebooks will be available for all students in need. Our goal is during the school year to go to a one-to-one environment, K to 12. There has been some nationwide, international-wide delay in Chromebook shipments. So originally they were scheduled to be here by August 1st. Now we're being told September 15th, so we remain hopeful, but we will have enough Chromebooks for any family that does not have their own device to start the year. And then at some time during the fall, we'll move to that one-to-one environment. Remote technology support will be in place for staff, students, and families should we be in a remote environment or in a hybrid. Anything from your Chromebooks not working to a parent needing a tutorial on how Google Classroom works. We're working with our technology department to set that up. School lunch. Lunch will be served daily in the cafeteria when students are present. It will also be made available during remote days for students in need. Part of that will be through a delivery program for some students and also a pickup option at various locations throughout the town. We're working on those details now. Transportation, later tonight we'll be presenting to a revised transportation policy, but in order to meet the reduced capacities, we will be looking at proposing a transportation policy that prioritizes students who live 2 miles or more from the school. Right now, under state law, transportation is required for students in grades K to 6 that live more than 2 miles. After we reviewed the data, which we'll share again later, really there's a need K to 12. So the decision was to keep the K to 12 model, but have the distance as the priority and then a lottery wait list for students who live under 2 miles based on capacities. Masks will be required at all times on the vans and buses, along with assigned seats, and windows will be kept open to increase the ventilation on vehicles at all times. We've gotten some questions about transitioning to and from state-sponsored remote learning. Again, we're still working our way through what exactly that looks like, but we will be looking at end of quarters, before or after a holiday break, something like that, so that we have time to plan to adequately educate and include the students as they transition. So if a family came to us on a Monday and said, I want my kid to start back in the hybrid model on Wednesday, we wouldn't really have time to plan for those transitions. So we'll look for some of those natural breaks, which is what we're hearing from all of our counterparts across the state that they're also doing. We've gotten lots and lots of questions about what would trigger a transition from hybrid to remote or back and forth. Those metrics are currently under development, and there's conversations between DESE and the MTA, which is the statewide teachers union, as well as at the local level, to really talk about what is that benchmark data that we can all agree to when those transitions would take place. Mary, if we can just go to the next slide. Masks, that's another big one. Masks will be required for all students in the Danvers Public Schools, pre-K to 12. We've been working with students during our summer program, especially in the pre-K, K and 1, and they've had great success, the kids that are attending the summer program. That will be a local policy addendum to our handbooks. The state requires it in grades 2 to 12 and makes it highly recommended in pre-K and 1, but we're recommending a local decision that would make it mandatory for all of our students to help protect staff and students and families and provide the most safe environment we can. Multiple mask breaks will take place during the day. We do have some rules around masks. They cannot be knitted or crocheted. They can't have vents built in. Again, just looking to maintain the safest environment and using the research out of the CDC and other public health data and information. Communication, we've had a lot of, again, questions about how will I be informed if there's a positive COVID-19 test in my school. Families will be made aware via the district and contact tracers when their child has been in close contact with a COVID-19 individual. We understand that families want to know anytime that there's a positive case in their school and with some level of detail. We'll continue to work through being as transparent as we can with families while maintaining the confidentiality for both the family and the students and staff involved. Another question is around testing, and are we going to be testing staff for COVID-19 or students? We're waiting again for information from DESE on that front. They continue to have conversations with the Executive Office of Health and Human Services. Preschool, we talked about that last time and then had a lot of follow-up conversations this week. At this moment, We're looking at a draft of a program for preschool where they would meet in cohorts. And instead of attending 4 days of school a week, they would only attend 2 days. But instead of there being 4 half days, there'll be 2 whole days. So the amount of time in the classroom will remain the same, but we'll change it to a consolidated schedule that will allow for a better cohort model. So that's a change from last week where we talked about shortening the morning and the afternoon to allow for cleaning in between. Instead, we're going to look at a cohort model like the hybrid schedule for other students. Childcare, another big question in a hybrid model. We continue to work with Danvers Recreation and the YMCA to look at programs to support families. The biggest challenge in all of these models is physical space. It's our biggest challenge as a district of not being able to bring people back in full in person due to space constraints and not being able to socially distance. We are also going to explore other community partners. A parent actually emailed us and said, have you reached out to daycares in town to see if they had any capacity? And we haven't. So we're going to start to look at that, and we appreciate any feedback that community members have. One specific question has been around Fun Club. So when students are in school in their hybrid days, so if your hybrid days in person are Monday, Tuesday, Fun Club will be available after school on Monday and Tuesday for you. So those 2 days would run like a normal school day that you had last year. Due to space constraints, Fun Club won't be available in the traditional Fun Club sense for families on the days that they're in hybrid or they're doing remote learning as part of hybrid, but we are currently having conversations. I was actually texting with Nick and Dave from the Danvers Recreation Department as late as 6 o'clock tonight, asking what other ideas can we come up with. So we keep looking at what ideas we can create and what spaces could be used to have program options for the remote days. Attendance and assessment. So last spring, when we jumped into remote learning last minute, we realized that it didn't have the same depth that we would like it to when we've had more of a chance to plan like this year. So attendance will be taken multiple times throughout the day, whether you're in person or you're working remotely, to ensure that students are attending, and that data will be passed on to the state and through our normal attendance policies. Additionally, assessments will be completed on a regular basis, and that's at all levels. So including the elementary level, we'll be looking at students completing assessments that we can monitor their progress. David and Rich are here tonight to help us with some of these next ones, and we thank them to help answer any questions that might come up. But our HVAC systems has been another big question. We do evaluate those on a regular basis. There are quarterly filter changes and quarterly preventative maintenance that is completed on the HVAC system. Our vendor ATCO monitors the systems on a daily basis to ensure that they're running to their specification. But we realize there might be some more questions and get into MERV rated filters, and we're currently reviewing all of that information with DPW and doing research on lead times and continuing to evaluate that. Cleaning, nightly cleaning and disinfection will take place, including electric static cleanings. Really make sure that we're taking it to the next level to help kill any germs that are there. And then bathroom and other common areas will be cleaned every 2 hours throughout the day to ensure that as kids are using those common spaces, that they're as clean as possible. Mark Carleo also is able to just jump on with us. He's here. We've been in regular communication with him. He's part of our reopening committee and really has been a nice advisor to help us make sure that we're on the right track. So what are our next steps? Tonight, we're going to have a discussion with all of you about the plan we just presented, and then the school committee will vote. As Lisa said earlier, the plan was due originally 8/10. They have bumped that date out to 8/14 if we need it. We'll begin impact bargaining with the unions and creating student schedules. The website will be updated regularly. We encourage all families to check the website for the most up-to-date information. Frequently asked questions will also be updated. We'll be working on getting a family survey out next week to start to collect what families' intentions are for the fall. During the month of August, we'll be having school-based forums. So that way we can answer some more of those individual questions and hear additional feedback about the plans as they become clearer from community members. August 24th, school committee meeting. We'll come back with plan refinements as we continue working through implementing the plan and then finalize the details for the September 16th opening, which will be the first day for students to return. And again, later on in our agenda, we'll be going through a revised calendar per DESE's agreement with the Mass Teachers Association and other large teacher unions in the state to reduce the academic year from 180 days to 170 days. So I think at this time, we'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Thompson, for feedback and questions.
Great. I'm sure we will have plenty of that. Jeff, would you like to start us off?
Sure, be happy to. You guys hear me okay? Good. I see a lot of heads nodding, so that's good. So thank you to everybody who put together the detailed information on this. And by I mean everybody, I mean everyone who participated in the working sessions, everybody who put together the frequently asked questions, everybody who wrote in. And so, I will start by, apologizing. I normally respond to every email that I get that's, unique to me and not sort of a blanket general email. But Dave is not lying when he said we got over, I got over 100. I'm sure others probably got 200 or 300, but I was not able to respond individually. So just realize I did read each and every one, and I also followed the links. Right. So there were links to New York Times articles. There were links to the Atlantic article in particular on aerosols and the importance of ventilation. There were articles on the importance of teachers being able to read the expressions of students for effective teaching. And so I read all of those. And so I thank you for sending all of those. There is a lot of information, I will just say as well, on the Department of Education and Secondary Schools website. And so a lot of the questions talk about what ifs, right? So what if there is a positive test in the classroom? What is the protocol? What if there is a suspected case, someone showing symptoms in the middle of the day on the bus? And so those were a lot of my questions, to be quite honest. I was happy to see pretty much all of those answered in the website there. So if folks haven't seen those, I would certainly encourage them to do that right now because a significant amount of those are there. The way that sort of my thought process is there's two variables or two ways to think about where we can go, and one is obviously the hybrid approach, and the other is full remote for various reasons. Most of the educators that wrote to me expressed desire for very good reasons, to start with a full remote model. Parents predominantly, not all, but predominantly were in favor of some sort of hybrid model, which is fine. And I think this is consistent with the public comments that everybody can read as well. So let me just highlight some of these concerns and then get a little bit more detail on them. First of all, on the asynchronous videos or training that would be done either in a remote setting or even if we go to a hybrid, is that going to be predominantly where our teachers and educators produce those videos themselves and they fit into the curriculum? Or is it some sort of Khan Academy where we're pulling off the websites from somewhere else? Can you talk a little bit more about what that is and what the expectation would be?
Yeah, for the most part, it would be the Danvers curriculum that will be presented in the asynchronous video. So teachers will be doing the videos. We do have some curriculum programs though that have very, very strong instructional videos. So for example, the Teachers College for Reading and Writing project that does our reading and writing workshop, they have what they call videotape mini lessons they're offering this year because they realized how hard the teachers are working to tape the mini lessons that are at about only 10 minutes or less. And they felt like they wanted the teachers to spend their energy in doing the small group instruction or doing the individual conferring with kids during the reading and writing workshop time, that if they could produce those lessons for kids, that would be better, and that the kids could continuously go back to those mini lessons, which would be a strategy a reader uses or a strategy a writer uses. And they could go back and reference those videos when they needed to. And so that if they were ready then at a different time to implement the strategy of reading or the writing strategy, which is more often the case, like you implement different writing strategies at different times, they could go back and get that information. So yeah, so there may be a 10-minute synchronous video or asynchronous video that is done by an outside group, but it really is very pertinent to the curriculum that we're doing. Another is the Amplify Science, has done some amazing science videos for kids for the instruction. And again, our teacher time, especially at the elementary level, when they have 4 or 5 subjects that they're trying to really prep for. So if those videos are, can do a better job at teaching that little bit of science, and again, it's a 10-minute video, 10 to 15 minutes, then let's use those and let the teachers spend their time working with their kids during a synchronous time and being able to do that smaller group instruction that, as I told you last week, is a real priority to our learning model for this next school year.
Okay, good. And I know we don't know the vendor, we don't know a lot about what I guess it's the LMS, the state provided learning management system vendor would be, but is the presumption for caregivers who opt to have their students participate remote that would be receiving this service, that those videos as well would be some sort of common basic videos and interpretation, would not be, there would be no or very limited production by the Danvers schools. It would be maybe a centralized service or something that would be then broadcast to everyone in Massachusetts.
Yes, again, we got the information late, so we thought that there's 2 different models that they're presenting as state sponsored, and one would be more of the synchronous kind of teaching model, and then there was another one that had a little bit more of the videotaping, and that we would also, no matter which model we picked, we would have a Danvers teacher or staff member continuously checking in on the kids to make sure that they're making progress in that curriculum. But we need much more time. We need more time than just one day here to really make a recommendation on that. So we're going to be taking the next week or so to really, vet their programs and then think about how it fits in Danvers and what our next best step should be.
I think one question we've heard from parents is, well, is my child not gonna then be behind in what the Danvers curriculum is when they return? Both the Danvers curriculum and that should be aligned to the state standards. So the content should be similar. The skills being taught should be similar through both programs, just delivered in a different way.
Good. Yeah. I mean, that'll be interesting. We'll have data points on that clearly. If we're going to be continue to have expectations around MCAS or AP tests or whatever, assuming we have a large enough, and it won't be a random sample, but some sort of sample that we can evaluate that. One, it's not, I don't know that I would call it a concern, but one logistical element to consider is what you mentioned, Mary, which is say you're a physics teacher at high school, and are you expected to check in on students who choose the remote learning option from the state for physics to make sure that it's that students are doing it and updating it? I mean, maybe it's close enough to what a physics teacher would be teaching in the school, but I would have a concern that the teachers now have to understand the curriculum. Maybe it's not in the same place. That they have to understand what was there, take time to follow up, if that's it. I mean, is that the thought right now, that the instructional teacher would do that, or it would be more of another administrator?
Yeah, it would probably be another administrator. And I guess that's been the challenge throughout this whole planning phase, is how do we staff a hybrid model happening as well, you know, the in-person, the hybrid model, the in-person happening and the remote, and how is that staffing working? And so then when you add a layer of the state sponsored remote learning, then that's another layer of staffing that we have to consider. So again, we're in the process of figuring out, Keith told you how many teachers are not available to come back. And so we're trying to think about how we use them. So we're still we have the models out, but now our next phase is really to take a look at the staffing and really kind of match up what roles are going to be what. So we'll have more information for that the next time we meet.
Gotcha. So if we decided to go full remote right away, by definition, then we would not use at all the state's LMS, and teachers would, for everybody, have their videos. Some they've created, most they've created, some offline, which are still high quality. They would do regular check-ins. And at least there would be some consistency there for our teachers, and make sure that all students are receiving the same sort of level.
Yep. Although some people may not, you know, because if we start in a remote learning model, we may be able to get into a hybrid learning model. Again, it's all about those metrics, right? So if the metrics are down, we may be able to get ourselves out to a hybrid model where kids can return. We'd phase in the return of kids back to school. And so a parent would have to think about then, are they ready to send their kid back to school with us in the hybrid model? Because that's how we would flow.
Right. So, well, again, we'll schedule even if we went full remote, our schedule would be developed under the premise that we would return for hybrid. So still trying to keep cohorts together and not just go back to what our traditional ways have been to give us that flexibility.
Gotcha. So if we did a full remote, there is no possibility for a parent to say, I want the state offered LMS versus the Danvers Public Schools. That students must take the Danvers Public Schools option.
I think we're still thinking that part through, but I think there may be an option of that is available to them. So but we have to, again, we're just at the beginning phases of the state sponsored program. We need more.
Great. One of the issues, and I appreciate the schedule graphics, because that does help a lot. So one question is kindergarten to second grade in particular, remote learning, everything I've read, and in particular from the teachers, just that to me just struck home the most, which is realistically, can you do a remote learning scenario for younger learners, right? Kindergarten through second grade. I mean, everything that they said completely makes sense, right? I mean, it's getting them to sit in front of a video, you know, just it's a lot of it is basics. It's the beginning of reading, which a lot of parents do anyway, which is terrific. But realistically, what do we believe we're going to realistically be able to teach, you know, kindergarten to second grade remotely?
Yeah, Jeff, that's exactly what you're saying is what really had us really rethink what that remote learning plan would look like. And that's why I really have to give kudos to that elementary team that was working on the scheduling on our subcommittee. And we've been meeting every Wednesday to do that. And then sometimes they were meeting offline, and they really came up with the idea that we need a smaller, we can't be working with like 22 second graders at a time or first graders online. So they really felt like that's why they want to split the class in half and have like half the class do the ELA and math in the morning, and then the second half of the class do it in the afternoon, and then have some really good, strong guided instruction, and then some check-ins also with the, you know, the cohort that's working independently as well. And if you look closer at the schedule, you'll see that. But we really understand that especially the Foundations, which is our phonics program, and then our reading workshop, really has to be done synchronously, and the teachers really need to be working with the kids online at that point.
Would you expect parents to be there, you know, helping with, you know, motor skills or other things as well? Is there an opportunity for that, or it's going to be a video with a kindergartner sitting there watching, and that's how the synchronous learning would be?
Not this, well, the parent's going to have to help the child depending on how fluent they are with using the technology. So they're going to have to probably get them set up for the day. There's going to be a Google Classroom, and every Google Classroom has a Google Meet link at the top. So that's going to be the meat. And what we think it was, what we know is going to happen is that is their day. They're on that link all day long. They'll not turn that off on their computer. And that the teachers that work with them will be coming in and will be working with them. So say they have phys ed. Well, the phys ed teacher is going to come on synchronously and talk to the students and kind of work with them there. So the students don't have to deviate from that link, but the teachers are coming in and out to work with them. So so that's kind of how we're thinking about that. So a parent would have to be around to help them with that. Every child has different needs. So you know, as a parent, you'll know, but they're obviously, you're going to be needing supervision for your younger learners at home anyways, right? So that whoever the adult that is with them would be helping them get organized and be ready to, but do they have to sit next to them for, the 6-hour school day? No, they don't have to sit next to them during that whole time.
Good. All right, let's go into some of the specific questions, maybe that I didn't see in the frequently asked questions, but I thought were particularly good ones, and ones I thought of too. So David Lane, let's get you up here with the HVAC. So I don't know that I want to go into the MERV rating. I don't know if I want to go into the filters and things like that, but the latest that I've read, and of course everybody's read different things, but this is an indoor virus, right? This attacks us a lot indoors for various reasons, and masks, and whether it's droplets or aerosols or whatnot. What's your latest thinking and perspective on the schools as they are right now, and our ability to provide whatever, and this is probably the wrong term, proper ventilation, so that, and again, if this is the wrong term or whatever, fresh air is in, it is filtered, there's airflow. I mean, are we there? Is having an open window enough in many cases? Fans, in Riverside in particular, I heard a couple comments about Riverside in particular being tough. So just what's your general view on if we can get there and where we need to be based on the science so far?
Sure. I guess the first thing is that when we're pulling in filtered air into the classrooms, which our unit ventilators do and our central HVAC does, that's pulling central air into the classroom, the filtered air into the classrooms, which is a good thing. We're taking all the particles out of that. We tested across the whole district, all 7 schools, and found that we can meet 4 air changes per hour in all the classrooms. That's what we're shooting for with the MERV 8 filters that we have. If we open windows, if it's a windy day, we're going to get more air coming in. You're going to get fresh air. It's a good thing. We are going to get particles in the classrooms. If a student had allergies, or if it was a pollen, all those kind of different things, those wouldn't be filtered out anymore. And so that can do it on the good days to open the windows. On the other days, to have that filtration system, it's going to work and change the air 4 times an hour. And with the cleaning systems, with the hydrostatic and the wipe downs, we're going to be able to knock the viruses out of those classrooms, it appears.
Good. And so even that's true for all buildings, even, Riverside where it's, it's hot and you don't have ventilation and all of that too. We're comfortable with that scenario as well.
Yes, we've checked the math on the fans that are in each classroom to make sure they can change that air over 4 times an hour.
Okay.
Even though it's the older technology, it's not a new modern central HVAC like we have at the high school.
Okay. All right.
The only other thing I would say is that if we do open windows, we're not going to have the option of air conditioning. We can't do the 2 things at the same time.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Thanks. And then more questions on for the rest of the team. So a couple of other questions about the actual teaching experience, which is something I was most interested in. Small things, because this has happened to me as well. If everybody is wearing masks, it is sometimes hard to hear, and I don't know if we're going to have fans or ventilation or whatever, but any thought to options about, I don't know if it's microphones or whatever, but ability to hear and ability to speak through masks louder?
All of our middle school and high school classrooms have individual amplification systems built in that teachers could utilize. And I would say that if we find it to be a problem at the elementary level, that's something that we could look at investing in with some of the grant money that we outlined before.
Okay. All right. That's good. Talk a little bit about the educational experience when teachers can't see, unless there's see-through masks that I haven't seen invented yet, students' faces. There's been some feedback regarding, look, half the educational experience is for teachers to understand and see the faces of students, the reactions, if they're getting it, if they're understanding. If everybody's got a mask, if you're 20 feet away at the back of a room, you can't see something, you know, it's, I'm not going to say it's pointless, but you know, there's been some comments that say it's a very difficult scenario to actually teach like that, and you know, we'd be better off just doing remote. Comments or thoughts based on previous experience or anybody else who's sort of done this before?
So I think what we're seeing in our extended year service, our summer program, is that students are able to have the mask, and teachers and students are communicating. So it is a new way. We're all getting used to doing that in our life with our mask on, and learning the level of our voice when we're talking, learning more about sort of our eyes and using our words to say. So we believe students are resilient and will adapt to, along with the adults, the use of the mask. For children that do have hearing impairments, they do have masks that do have that plastic piece there, so that way a child can see the teacher's mouth and others in the classroom. So Keith could probably add a little bit more, but I believe we also have some of those. We'll have those in stock also.
We will, right? Especially for those specialty programs, have masks with clear inserts on hand for the start of the school year.
Okay, good. Another issue that kind of came up a couple of times, which I'm curious about too, is you know, enforcement of the rules, right? And so I know there were some frequently asked questions on this, and maybe this is a policy decision or something that we've got, but student doesn't want to wear a mask. I'm not going to go through all of the scenarios, but you know, what there is a, you know, some concern expressed that students may not you know, follow all of these protocols, and if they don't, then, you know, is it up to the teacher? Is there an administrator? You know, what's, and I don't need to know everything, but just what's the general theme of how enforcement of these health related masks, social distancing, et cetera, will be enforced in the schools?
So you'll see that in the student handbook addendum that's later on in the agenda. So we're actually going to ask you to vote as the handbook addendum. Again, requiring the masks pre-K to 12 rather than just 2 to 12. And we did include a protocol where the teacher would provide the student with a verbal prompt to remind them to put on their masks. If the student refused, the teacher would call the administrator. The administrator would come get the student from the classroom, bring them down to the office or the designated COVID room, have a conversation with them, have the nurse have a conversation with them about why masks are important, provide those reminders for them to put it on. And if they did, they would get to go back to their next period class. If the student still refused to wear their mask, we would have the parents come and pick the student up. So it is a mandatory piece. It's mandatory from the state. It's not optional. So the student would need to be dismissed if they're not wearing the mask as directed.
Do teachers, what are the expectations of teachers as far as wiping down desks, cleaning, et cetera? Are they expected to do that, or how does that normally work?
So DPW will clean the rooms every night to disinfect them electrostatically, clean them as we talked about. Teachers will be provided with a product called Maxima and paper towels. So should they wish to clean the rooms more frequently, they're welcome to. At the middle school and high school level, where students will still be going between classrooms, they'll be in smaller cohorts, but going between classrooms, we'll be asking the students to assist with the cleaning of desks at the end of the class period. So each student would help clean their desk before they go on to their next class to ensure it's ready for the next group of students.
Okay, great. Last question is, talk a little bit about the, what do the check-ins look like? So it's, Clearly on days when students are there in person, check-ins are fine. And Wednesdays, say you're there live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you're remote. There was some comments made. Well, teachers will check in. Is that teachers will check in every single remote day as well for that class? Or only certain teachers will check in? What does a check-in mean for the days when students aren't there?
Yep. So we will have a morning kind of time for checking in, and we'll be doing a social emotional learning activity because that's a very important thing. We obviously, the district, with this new strategic plan, we had already started working on increasing, doing more and more social emotional learning with our students, and we'll be doing that even now. And I think we all need it, more so with everything that we've been going through this challenging time. Then during the remote days, depending on the level, it depends on how much oversight you're going to have with your teachers. So your teachers will be available to do check in with you at some point during the day. We also will have other staff members that are going to be responsible for the students that are working remotely. So if there needs to be some help, they're also going to have certain times through the day where they will check in with whole classes to make sure that how they're that things are going well in their schedule and the work is happening. So there's going to be people, being able to check on that. At this current time, we're thinking about the teachers that are working remotely are the ones that are helping to check in on the remote learning. But again, the staffing and all that is the next phase of our planning.
Okay. Great. All right, Mr. Chairman, those are my questions. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Moving along here, Eric, would you like to go next? You're on mute, Eric.
My apologies. I'd like to start with David Lane, actually, and I do want to talk about them. What is a MERV rating?
So a MERV rating is what the rating is the size of particles that the filter filters out of the air and the efficiency at which it does each particle size. So as the MERV rating goes up, it takes out smaller particles and it takes out more particles.
Okay. And if I understand correctly, when it comes to COVID, for example, there's a range of filters that you could use with different MERV ratings. What does that range run from?
So the range runs from 1 all the way up to, I believe, 16. And then we get into what we call the HEPA filters, which are like the filters that are on our vacuums.
What's the recommended range for dealing with COVID?
So I haven't really seen a recommended range. I've been told, and maybe Mark Carleo can back me up on this, that the particle size of COVID is like 0.3 microns, which you would need a very dense filter to be able to take out a 0.3 micron filtrate particle. So in order to get COVID microns out, you would need very dense filters, which then we would actually not have the same amount of airflow in the classrooms.
So which is more dense? Which is more dense, an MERV rated one or a 12 MERV rated one?
A 16 is the most dense.
Okay, so they go up. Any increases with the so we're the 8 is in the middle, basically, of the 1 to 16.
That's correct.
What I had heard, and I'm not going to say correct because hey, you hear lots of things, but my understanding was that the recommended range from dealing with COVID was like 8 to up to 13. So the 8 is really at the end of the range to deal with COVID. What you're saying is no.
Well, as you get higher from 8 and above, you get more of the smaller particles will be taken out.
Okay.
When you get in the smallest COVID size of the 0.3,
Mhm.
Start taking some of them out right around 13 and 14.
Okay.
It's not
And-
100% of them.
And what you trade in terms of the, what you trade is the higher the MERV, the less the airflow. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So right now, the MERV 8 is going to allow us to recycle that air very efficiently. It's not going to eliminate every COVID molecule. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dave. Some other, and there's no particular order to these questions, but some of them came up from the parents. And I would say, much like Jeff said, I read an awful lot of emails. I read every email that came in. I haven't had a chance to answer many, but I did look at them all. I followed links, and I really appreciate the time people took and the support that the people who wrote those emails generally expressed for the decision that we're being asked to make. So I appreciate that understanding. But things came up, and really this could be Lisa or Mary. At least one person raised the possibility of potential outdoor classes. Have we talked about that, thought about that? I know some other schools in different parts of the country have thought about that. Have we talked about it at all?
I think actually, Eric, I was going to say,
Yep.
okay. We have talked a lot about that. Part of the challenge is once October comes, that becomes less of a desirable location to be. The other piece comes with school security and being outside in an environment like that in a regularly scheduled, regular location, we feel presents some challenges. We do bring classes out on a regular basis and we'll continue to do that, but we always have the confines of the schools inside that are more secure to bring them to. So we weren't comfortable putting them outside in a regularly scheduled interval like that.
Okay, so that would not work on a regular basis. Maybe as a one-off at some time on a really good day, it might be possible. But
like we do with PE classes or English classes, we've done that historically. So we'd continue to encourage teachers to do that.
okay,
I think you'll see out a lot in the coming school year.
sure.
Talk to some of the phys ed teachers, and they're planning on doing a lot more outdoor
Okay.
lessons.
One question I had is really not so much even paying for the substitutes or paying for different staff, but the availability of substitutes. My understanding has always been that it's a challenge to find enough substitutes under a typical scenario. And now we're going to have really an atypical scenario in terms of the potential for teachers being out either for short or longer terms. And it seems like every district locally is going to be facing this problem. What do we feel is going to be the availability of substitutes? And what is the potential impact for our educational program under the hybrid model?
So we think about substitutes in two different pots. So one pot is our daily substitutes and one is our long-term substitutes. So when we hire long-term substitutes that are typically a month or more, unless we're in a specialty area like a school psychologist or a physics teacher, we usually get a fair number of candidates to interview and choose from. They might be younger educators who haven't found that first job yet. It might be somebody that's being a teacher aide. When it comes to daily substitutes, that has been a challenge in the past few years. That pool of substitutes is always tied strongly to the economy. So when the economy is strong and unemployment is low, we don't have a lot of substitutes. Historically, when the economy is struggling more and the unemployment rate is up, we get a better pool of substitutes interested in doing the work. We have had initial conversations with Kelly Services, the provider, already about working on recruiting and how we even schedule the substitutes to ensure that they're only in the same building throughout the week the best possible. So in the past, they might have been Monday at Great Oak, Tuesday at Highlands, Wednesday at Thorpe. And so we're going to try to keep substitutes in the same building for the week to lower those cohorts, as well as hiring one building substitute for each elementary school and 2 building subs for the middle school and high school. And that will be an individual who will show up every day, assuming that there's work. And if there's not a teacher who is out on that given day, then they would become additional support in a classroom where they might need an extra hand for the day. So to help improve the fill rate and the consistency, we've trying to take some proactive steps to improve that.
It appears you thought that through, so thank you. Another question, and this was raised by a number of persons. The concern is that, particularly when it comes to younger learners and or special education students, to do the job right, it takes a fair amount of hands-on work with the students, working in very close proximity with students. And have we looked at how to protect students and staff in those scenarios? Is it going to be possible to deliver the services that way? How will that look if in fact it really is necessary to the education process for those students?
It will be, we believe it will be possible. Keith has worked on the additional PPE for different scenarios, and the types of teaching that teachers will have. I think we'll continue to take examples again from our summer programs, from working with our consortium and what they've learned about the summer program with students that may be medically fragile and students that have different learning needs. And I think also looking from daycares. And so we'll be learning from those that are taking place during the summertime and be able to share that with our staff, so that way they have the proper PPE and are able to interact with students to deliver the curriculum and to have the services that they need.
Okay. Is our director of health with us or no?
Yes, he is. Mark Kaleo is with us. Yes.
Mark, I'm sorry, I was looking at the other, I apologize, I was looking at the wrong box. Mark, so tell us what's going on in Danvers vis-a-vis COVID cases. The Globe, I think, reported 13 positive tests last week. The website for Danvers had, I want to say, 10 or 12 active cases, up from about 7 a week or so ago, but those numbers change a lot. So where are we today?
Yeah, so what you stated from our website is pretty accurate. As of a couple of days ago, yeah, I believe it was 12 off the top of my head. And that's what we have for active cases. That changes not quite daily, but almost daily, where maybe we get one new case and lose a couple others. Or I think in the last week or so, we had 2 new cases come in. So it's certainly much more quiet than it was in March and April and May. So yeah, that's about where we're at. It's quieted down.
How do we find out about positives?
Well, you'll see them reflected on our weekly post on our website.
No, I mean, as a town, how do we actually, if any resident tests positive, are we automatically notified? How does that work?
The resident, you mean the person who tests positive?
Yeah. How do we as a town, how does Danvers find out? Not who it is, but that, hey, we've got, 3 positive cases this week and 4 next week. How do we get that information in?
Well, that's what we're posting on our website. Every week we update that active number of cases. We're not posting every time we get another case.
No. I feel like
I guess I'm not understanding what you're
maybe
asking.
The CDC reports it, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't the CDC?
I'm wondering, where does the information come?
Oh, where does it originate from?
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry. So Massachusetts law requires that any healthcare provider or laboratory that has a positive diagnosis, and it's not just for COVID. We do this routinely. It's for any number of infectious diseases that are reportable in Massachusetts by law. Those reports come to us through a statewide database referred to as MAVEN, which is the Massachusetts Virtual Epidemiological Network. Our public health nurse receives those cases through MAVEN, and then she conducts the follow-up from there.
Okay. And at this point, what's the rough testing turnover time in the North Shore area?
It's gone up quite a bit. I've seen estimates ranging from 6 days to 14 days. A lot of the turnover depends on why are you being tested. So if you're, say, a contact of a positive case, then yeah, you might see like a 10-day turnaround on your test. If you are symptomatic and a high-risk individual, or you have a job where it would be more likely that you're being exposed, then your turnaround will probably be a little quicker. That's about what we're seeing these days. And then even the rapid tests, those are getting, it's difficult to even get one of those done.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that we are aware of 12 active cases? Given the fact that there are people who walk around asymptomatic and don't get tested, there's probably more actual cases than 12.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Now, how do we handle the contact tracing part of the role that your office plays?
Sure. So what we've done over the last few months, we actually, and thank you to the school department, of course, we had our school nurses were assisting our public health nurse. And then the process is essentially the case comes through Maven. Our public health nurse pulls that data and then disseminated it to one of those school nurses, or she herself would do the follow-up. So the individual was contacted. They're asked, where have you been since, whatever date they were infectious. And then they work to identify those contacts. And then we start contacting the contacts and letting them know they need to be quarantined or tested nowadays.
Have you found those contacts to be relatively cooperative, or?
Yeah, overwhelmingly, yeah. There's, of course, your outliers that will yell and curse at the nurses or hang up on them. But those were, there was a few cases of those, absolutely. But overall, these calls were pretty routine. People wanted to cooperate because this was a pandemic and they understood what's at stake.
Sure. The other question I would have for you, Mark, and thank you for answering all these, in terms of the enforcement of masks in town, business compliance, food service compliance, all of that, is your office getting a lot of feedback from the community about positives, about negatives? How are we seeing the business community and the community in general cooperate with the measures that we're taking?
Well, my perception of those things is often skewed because we generally only get the calls that are negative when somebody isn't following the rules. We're getting many calls. A lot of them are relative to masks. In fact, they're almost entirely about masks. Your occasional customer in a store who, wears it like a chin strap or just doesn't have one at all. Occasionally employees where they have, their nose still exposed or just aren't wearing one at all. Those ones always leave me confused. And then the process from there, if you're interested, we receive the call, I receive the call. And then either myself or Dennis, who's our inspector, will contact the establishment and provide them, here's the guidance, here's the face covering requirements, make sure that they know that this is what exists. And we'll talk to the managers of these establishments about they have a duty to supervise, and how are you doing it? How are you communicating these requirements to your employees? And working with them to establish a culture where everybody feels like they just should wear their mask.
Okay.
After that, there's some escalating enforcement that involves written warnings, because the first phone call is the verbal warning. Then there's a written warning, and then from there we can issue fines. We haven't had to issue fines yet.
Good. Well, I'm sure it's your office is probably about as busy as you can be, and I'm sure it's all hands on deck. And so I certainly appreciate what you're doing, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry I misunderstood your first question.
No, maybe I wasn't clear. Believe me, that can happen. All right, so Keith, I guess this is really for you, maybe for David Lane, that is. So say the bus drivers are going to be expected to enforce the rules on the buses, right?
Yep.
Okay. The bus drivers are not Danvers employees, they're employees of the bus company, right?
They're split. 8 or 10 of our drivers of the big yellow buses, as we call them, are Salter employees, and 4 of them are Town of Danvers employees.
Okay, so out of 14, we have 4. So for who's going to be cleaning the buses?
We're currently working with Salter Transportation to clean their buses as well as our buses with their cleaning practices. It'll actually require us to move where we store our buses from the DPW yard on Hobart Street down to the Liberty Tree Mall, which is where Salter houses their buses, and they'll complete that cleaning for us.
Okay, so it's their employees. David, in terms of the disinfecting and the work in the schools, under the supervision of the DPW, would we subcontract that out to cleaning companies, or is it actual Danvers employees doing this?
It will be a combination of both. Just
Okay.
it'll be a model where we'll have our own staff in the buildings, both doing the cleaning during the day and doing the hydrostatic cleaning. The wiping down at night of the surfaces, likely that will do mostly by the contractors.
Okay. All right. Now, Lisa, what, and I guess this is for Lisa, possibly for Keith. So if a bus, what is the protocol for the bus driver who is concerned about the student on the bus? Is he looking for someone who appears feverish, who's coughing? You're on the bus, you're on the way to school with a bunch of kids, and now you kind of suspect, hey, maybe this kid isn't feeling well. What's the bus driver supposed to do?
So I think I will ask Keith because he's been in touch directly with the busing company.
Thank you.
So I think before that kid ever gets on the bus, we're asking parents to be screening their children. And if they have a cough, if they have a fever, please don't send them to school. This is critical. It's critical for our staff not to worry about substitute coverage, any of that. If you're sick, you need to stay home. If the driver suspects a student is ill, they will most likely, if it's mid-route, drive the student the rest of the way to the school. The student will be outside with adult supervision or placed into the COVID designated room within the building. The student will be asked to be picked up by their parents, and then we'll start the public health process of testing, contact tracing, whatever else might be involved with that.
And will Mark's office take care of that piece?
Mark, you can maybe help with how contact tracing works. Yeah.
Okay. So now you've got the kid on the bus. He's going to be quarantined. What about the other students on the bus? Are they going to have to be quarantined too?
Again, following the guidelines and based on spacing and distance from the students and whether they're a close contact or not, yes, there is a possibility they will need to be quarantined as well. We're really encouraging any family that has the ability to transport their own child to and from school, whether that's special education, going to an out-of-district school, or it's an in-town transportation. The safest way to get to school is to either walk, ride your bike, or have one of your parents transport you.
Bus driver would have to be quarantined too, probably, right?
Most likely.
Okay. I'm sorry, just bear with me one sec. It seemed like a lot of, at least a couple of key areas, we are waiting for DESE to give us further guidance as we start to get into, we're in early August, won't be far until we're in mid-August. But you mentioned that we're waiting on DESE guidance in terms of the remote option if we go back to a hybrid model and parents opt for the remote option for their particular students. We're waiting for more clarification on who the vendors would be and what they would look like.
We did just get that yesterday.
Yeah.
So yesterday, and Mary had shared, it was in the afternoon that we had the webinar. So they did present 2 vendors that now have a state contract through Massachusetts, and also 2 of the virtual schools that Massachusetts has already worked with, and the process to be able to work with them. So we need to give them some information in another week of where we're leaning toward, and that we just need to review all of that material that we only got yesterday before we can really discuss more in detail of how Danvers would be using the support from the state.
Sure. Now, in the plan, there is a page devoted to the state full remote learning alternative. And under alignment to district-wide plan, it mentions it serves best, meaning the remote plan, serves best as a standalone program for a small or large percentage of students who are interested in remote learning for a longer period of time, does not lend itself to students moving between in-person, hybrid, and remote settings unless the district decides to adopt the LMS provided curriculum for all students. We're addressing that by saying we'll look for natural breakpoints to bring students back in. But there is
Yeah.
still, at least based on this, there is an issue with whether the curriculum's aligned unless the state makes sure that it is, correct?
Yes, so in the by this debate, what the state has put out as when we say state supported, a state piece of it, it's providing districts now with these vendors, with the learning management system. And then we would be working directly with the learning management system, which we really found out more yesterday about that.
Okay.
So we see it as similar to, let me take a step back part of your question. With that, it's not going to be aligned. They're aligned with the state frameworks. It doesn't mean exactly that if we're teaching fractions this 2 weeks, that curriculum is teaching fractions at the same 2 weeks. We'll have to monitor those pieces, why the natural breaks will be important. How we are looking at it is in past years, a student could move from one school in a different city or town or a different state and move to Danvers, and we are able to integrate them in. So it's the same thing. It's not impossible. It would be better if you stayed with one of the models, but it's not impossible to move, or why we're saying though, but you can't move from a Monday to a Wednesday. We're going to be looking at natural breaks. So that way then the student can then become part of the class again, if that's what the parents choose.
And that makes sense that it's not impossible to do, but I suspect that we would be having to address that with more students this year than we would in a normal circumstance. I don't know what percentage of students normally move in during a school year, but I'm guessing it's not 10 or 12%. So it will be a bit of a challenge, but one we think we can meet.
Yes.
Okay. I'm almost done with my initial questions. All right, that's all I have for now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Eric. Arthur, you're next on my screen. Would you like to go next?
Sure. Eric and Jeff asked a lot of good questions, so we won't have to. I won't have to take up a lot more time with questions, but I just have a few follow-ups, kind of jumping off on what they asked. Dave Lane, just kind of going off what Eric was talking about, and also what you had talked about, which is the changing of the air versus the removing of the particles. Can I just get you to kind of expand on that a little bit more? It sounds like you can't do both. Is that right? I mean, you have to find the midpoint that works the best, or what? How do I understand that better?
With our current ventilation system, we can't do both. We can't do the recommended 4 changes per hour and get the small particles out with the ventilation system.
Okay.
If we really wanted to try to filter air and get all those 0.3 micron particles out, we're really looking at, we need air purifiers in the classrooms to do that. That's a device that we're looking at for classrooms that don't have windows, perhaps, or don't have anything like that. Perhaps we may have to look at an air purifier for a room like that.
Okay. All right. And this is something that though have you checked? I mean, I think you may have said this, but I just want to make sure. Have you checked all the rooms in all the schools relative to the 4 changes per hour? Dave?
So yeah, we've gone through and so say at an elementary school, we know that there's 15 classrooms with the same kind of unit. So we've checked that unit out. We know those 15 classrooms. So yes, our staff has gone through and checked all the spaces everywhere, done the calcs, working with our contractor ADT. They're the professionals. We work right with them with the numbers.
Okay.
ATCO, I mean, not ADT, ATCO.
Okay, thanks. And I'm kind of like Eric, I'm kind of jumping around here and just hitting on different points. But what does Wednesday? What does the cleaning on Wednesday look like? What is going on that day that's different than everything else?
So what I believe is on Wednesdays, we're going to be able to clean more surfaces in the classrooms. We're going to be able to wipe down everything in the classroom. Whereas on a nightly basis, it's almost we're getting the horizontal surfaces that where things would land on, and the high use, all the handles, everything that people touch, we'll be able to do that on a nightly basis. And then we'll be able to on Wednesday just go right through and clean, really do more of a deep cleaning.
All right, and you'll have
Just to add a little bit,
Go ahead.
We're gonna forego some of our nightly vacuuming and some of that type of cleaning to be able to disinfect more. So on Wednesdays, they'll really be able to fully vacuum and hit both of those checklists versus needing to prioritize one of them over the other.
Okay, all right. Keith, since you just spoke, I'll ask you a question. Do you based on what you said, do you anticipate that with the Massachusetts unemployment rate being pretty high right now, do you anticipate there being a possibility of having a larger pool of substitutes to choose from?
We're hopeful. Kelly has actually restructured so they have more local support. So we have an individual who's working on recruiting for just 2 towns in Massachusetts at the moment, so to help really be hands-on. And then the district also typically has a bachelor's degree requirement for all substitutes for this upcoming year. We're not waiving it universally, but we're saying to Kelly that we're willing to review applications of individuals they think would be a good fit that may not possess a bachelor's degree. So we're hopeful. We won't really know until we get into the year.
Okay. Let me ask Mark if let me just ask you more of a general question. You've been part of the committee over the summer, and you've been working with everybody on this process of trying to get us back to school. And you understand that the hybrid plan. You're our health director. Are you comfortable with the hybrid plan as far as putting people into our buildings?
Yeah, the Board of Health is going to support whatever measures the school committee decides to take, so long as they're based on some reasonable guidance.
So let me ask you a different way. Do you have any reason to advise us not to use the buildings in this hybrid
Based on what I've seen from guidance that's put out there, that's a part of the guidance. It's an option.
But let me try to ask it. If you saw something that was dangerous, would you have to step in?
In the schools, you mean?
In the school buildings?
Sure.
Okay. All right. And as of now, you don't see anything that would cause you to do that?
No.
Okay. I'm going to jump back to Keith or Lisa for a minute. You talked a little bit about the budgetary issues and the fact that, we have money through December and you have an issue with long-term substitutes because it would require a commitment for the entire year. And it's probably premature, and you probably haven't really gotten there yet because there's a lot of stuff going on with finances and what's going to come in and what's not going to come in. But has there been any discussion with the town, with the town manager or anybody else about what our situation might look like as we get towards the end of this year and the beginning of next year? I mean, I'm anticipating from a town meeting standpoint that we're going to have more town meetings, special town meetings. But has there been any discussion that you're aware of that kind of gives you any idea about what's happening there?
So I'll take a crack at that. We have had lots of conversations with Steve and with Rodney, and they've been very supportive. The town also was given a $2 million CARES Act grant from the state, and they've been great with picking up different expenses that we can put under that CARES Act money to help reserve some of the school side money. We've been able to share the spreadsheet about where our potential cost concerns are around transportation, around substitutes, and around those different factors. I would say it's premature to really have a firm number because our charge back to the administrators has been now, okay, so at the high school, if you have 4 teachers that can't return, but we think we're going to have 10% of students that want to go full remote, reschedule the whole high school with 4 less teachers and let's see what we can do. So until we do that, and then we look at the creative solutions at the elementary level, might be, okay, so if we have 2 teachers that can be in person and a 3-person team, can we pool those kids together? And are there ways we can think outside the box without needing to hire a substitute, working collaboratively with the teachers union? So it's just a little bit too early to know exact dollars to know what we might have to ask for the town for actual funding.
And have we, and if this was answered, I'm sorry, but have we, and it's probably too early for this too, maybe, but have we hired any full-time subs yet?
We've worked on the building subs with Kelly Services. They're in the process of hiring those. And then the only long-term subs we've hired to date are those from maternity leaves.
And
that
then
are going to be out.
And my question was wrong. I meant to say long-term subs, but okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Only for the maternity leaves, not
Okay.
for the other positions yet.
Okay. All right. I mean, like I said, Jeff and Eric hit on a lot of the questions. I think that's just the kind of things that I want to clarify off of that. So I'm good for now. Dave.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank everyone for being here tonight. Sorry I missed last week, but I have kind of a number of questions. Some have already been answered, but I want to touch upon a few others. So Mary, some questions. With the hybrid, I've seen this question, will siblings be scheduled on the same cohort days?
Yes, that is a priority for us in the cohort system.
So does that mean, you know, you have an elementary school kid, you have a middle school kid, and a high school kid? Are we working to try to get them all on that same cohort day?
Yes, the families will be seeing a survey coming out next week where we're asking for that information so that we will be able to do the sorts that way for the cohort.
Great. Want to touch upon preschool. I think Keith might have, or you answered this earlier. I know in the original plan, it had the preschool doing morning and afternoon, but we're looking at doing the cohort thing for preschool going forward, where Group A goes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is virtual cleaning, and then Thursday, Friday is Group B. Do the preschoolers, will Group B do virtual when Group A is in class, or is it just, you know, Monday, Tuesday is A, and Thursday, Friday is B?
I would say we're
Right.
still a little bit too early in the plan to fully define what those remote days would look like, but because we do define that as one of our high needs populations, one of those special populations, the goal is to keep the in-person service hours as close to the same as we can, just in a different model.
Does the preschool program fall under the daycare program for the state, or do they fall under elementary?
So because it's a school-run program, it falls under DESE and through the Department of Education instead of through the Early Childhood Division of the state.
Okay. And then I think we also touched upon there's opportunities on Wednesday for Google Meet for the classes to meet as a whole to go over, like, you know, an SEL or just a meet, check in, see how kids are going. Is that what we said earlier, Mary?
Yep, and there'll be some synchronous instruction as well on Wednesdays.
So families that choose the remote, and if we go with one of the state programs that were just released last night, we figure out which one that is. I know in the frequently asked questions, like that's where they go, and we have a teacher from Danvers that checks in with them. Is there an opportunity for those students at some point, maybe it's the Wednesday, to check in with the teachers just as a class meeting, just so that they can at least see their peers that they were in class with prior to this choice that they're making? Is that something that
it's something we explore when we are looking at the vendors and seeing what their models look like? So if their models would, you know, that there's an availability, the time matches up, we could potentially do that. We just need to really do a lot more research and call the vendors and kind of get a lay of the land of what their school days look like. We got a very quick overview of it, and then they asked us to contact the vendors ourselves to get more information.
Right. I read through that last night. It was a lot of information that I think we, you know, as a district need to go through thoroughly just to make sure we're picking the right vendor. The high need students. what are the restrictions? Because high need students, the teachers a lot of times have to have more close interaction with those students, closer than a normal classroom. How's that? What are the recommendations for that, as well as keeping our staff safe? You know, a high need student might need help with manipulating occupational fine motor skills. So how is that supposed to be handled in a safe manner? Anyone?
So Mary
Sure,
Tatum and her
Keith?
I say Mary Tatum and her staff have been working on new kind of creative ways that they can interact with some of those students. But when there are students that even, let's say, need toileting assistance or other support like that, there's additional PPE that we have on hand, including nitrate gloves and disposable gowns and reusable gowns to provide the staff with that additional layer of protection than may be given to the average classroom teacher.
And in the summer program, those are high need students that our staff's been working with. How's that been going?
It's been successful, and an update from Mary that, again, the staff has been accommodating. They've been working out those strategies, and our students have been successful during the summer program.
How many have been enrolled in that program this summer? Anyone?
Do you have that number, Keith? We can get that number for you in just a few moments.
Okay. Lunches for all levels. So did I read correctly? Because I had heard originally lunch was going to be in classrooms. So elementary, middle school, and high school, are they all going to be able to have it in either a CAF or a gymnasium space?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I was making sure I was off of mute as I was texting Mary Tatum, the other question. Yes, they'll all be able to eat outside of the classroom 6 feet apart in either a gymnasium or cafeteria.
So again, back to the social distancing. A kindergartner might need help opening a yogurt. How's that going to be handled? Same thing as the staff that's monitoring lunch going to have the PPE on or available so that they can go and maybe open that yogurt or open that beverage that the kindergartner or preschooler or first graders having trouble with?
Yes, we'll provide them with the additional PPE, and obviously our goal with all kindergarten students each year is to make them as self-sufficient with lunch as quick as we can. We know it's a new endeavor for them, but we also want to encourage parents, start practicing now with your kindergarten students. Let them open their own yogurt, open their own juice boxes when they're having lunch at home. So they're working on some of those, motor skills before they get to the school setting.
And then especially during like lunch period is over, who's cleaning the lunch tables and the chairs for the next group?
We're working through before the next group. We're working through that process, but it'll be a collaborative effort between the school cafeteria workers and the building custodians as it is now, as we do, and then as well starting to have conversations with what role the teacher aides may have in that.
I know childcare has been an issue for a lot of families based upon if it's the hybrid, what they're out working. What are they doing with their kids on the days where they're not in school? I know you said you were talking with the rec. I know there's some space issues with that. I know we've talked with our local Y, and I know you mentioned there's going to be other businesses chatting with. Have you considered the YMCA of the North Shore as an alternative as well?
No, but that's a good community partner to reach out to, the North Shore Beyond the Danvers Y. So we can reach out to them in the coming week.
I know they've been providing emergency care for the essential workers since at least April, maybe even March, and they've been doing summer camps as well. And for the most part seems to be working quite well, but maybe that's an alternative to if we don't have anything in town. I think maybe the rec part of it was space. There was no space and staffing might be an issue, but we have the Liberty Tree Mall that pretty much is kind of vacant over there. And I'm wondering if the town might consider working with Simon Properties, and maybe there's an opportunity. There's some pretty large spaces of stores that have closed. I'm wondering if that's an opportunity for space to maybe try to get something going for there. Just a thought, thinking out loud. I know it might cost money, but it's, just some kind of thought. So then I just want to talk a little bit about the HVAC. I want to go back to that a little bit, which I understand the levels of the MERV. But, is it unreasonable to try to get a MERV 13 filter for these HVACs, Dave or Rich?
So the range 13 filters, if we want to give up the air exchanges, we could do that. We'd have air exchanges more in the order of 2 air exchanges per hour. We would not be able to get them until like Christmas due to they're back ordered right now.
Excellent. Okay.
And Mary Beth, I have the answer on the EYS program. We had on any given week between 35 and 40 students that were in person.
And that was broken down by numbers, maybe in different sections, smaller cohorts throughout the building, or were they 35 in one area together?
No, 35 to 40 was the total. So we would have a program at the high school. We had the program for our younger learners in middle school. So they were all in small separate cohorts.
Okay, thank you. So they're back ordered to then. Does it make sense to try to get those other filters you talked about for the classrooms that have the MERV 8 and to try to catch more particles with the other filter? I can't remember what you called them. HEPA, was it a HEPA filter?
Yeah, sure. A HEPA filter, we would not be able to put that level of filtration on our units.
So it's not like a standalone filter that you would buy in the store that goes into a classroom?
Separate from the filtration. So we could go, up to the MERV, around about the MERV 13, we could put into our ventilation units. Separate from that, we'd be looking at standalone air purifiers in the classrooms. Those, we could look at buying those, which we've talked to the school staff about for areas that may not have windows or something in the classroom to have an air purifier there.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, just add to that, we are working with the principals to rotate classroom teachers who may be in windowless rooms to be in a room with windows for this school year. So, specialists won't be meeting in the traditional sense for art, music, and PE. They may be going to the classroom where the kids are. So those classrooms could be swapped and become a classroom for the year with windows that open so that we can increase the fresh air.
Yeah, I think that would be a smart choice to try to give them additional ventilation and circulation because those rooms, like Jeff said, do get hot. And I know at Riverside, definitely using the space available, and some of those spaces are not conducive to great circulation at all with air. So I think maybe trying to look at the best way that we can create great ventilation in all classrooms, especially the classrooms that certainly get a lot hotter than others. Let me see. And so where the filters are changed quarterly, does it make sense to do it more frequently, or is that not something that, does it matter? We change them, if we change them by like every 2 weeks versus quarter, or every month instead of quarterly, does that help with the filters?
So what we've been told is that they keep their rated level of efficiency for the quarter, for that many hours.
Okay.
So we don't need to replace them more than quarterly.
Okay. But do we check them more frequently than quarterly? Just to check them?
We could, normally we don't unless something happened. If we had something where a lot of dust was created, but as staff, we could talk about, should we get in and actually open up units and go look at them. It's very easy to check on certain ones, and that's something that we could do spot checks. Absolutely.
Yeah, because sometimes even with vacuums, you think they're going to last, and next thing you know, you're like, they're filthy. So maybe that's something we can at least, as a town, maybe try to look into just trying to do, especially maybe in the schools that have poor circulation, ventilation, maybe. That's
So we do have our preventative maintenance plan, and we can include those types of inspections on the filters as well.
Okay, thank you.
And I would say that ACO does do an assessment of the system on a daily basis through the computerized components to make sure they're running where they can. And then there's a whole response system that principals know about how to inform DPW when a system's not running so that they can fix them as soon as possible on a daily basis.
And then I know, I can't remember what the time frame was, but I know, I think, was it last summer, the AC went down for a bit, had to be fixed. What happens if these systems at a particular school goes down and the ventilation becomes a little bit more challenging for circulation? As a school district, what are our thoughts? Or DPW, is it maybe they don't have school that day because of the ventilation? Thinking.
I was going to
So
say
what-
that I think rolls into the transitions back and forth between, you know, full remote and in-person learning, so that if we did have a major failure and we felt it wasn't safe, that one particular school, or if we had an outbreak at one particular school, that school could go to remote learning for the day to continue the school year. Same thing with snow days, so we could look at that swapping back and forth when it is a major failure. If it's just an individual room, how do we again rotate that class to a space that the HVAC system is working for the day?
Right.
And we're in constant contact with the school officials, you know, during the day, just so we can make a live time decision on anything like that.
No, thank you. I do. Yeah, I see DPW there all the time, and I thank you guys for the great working partnership that you have with the school district. Not many towns, cities and towns have this type of relationship. So I do want to thank you very much, and the whole team, for all their hard work. Okay. I think that's all I had for buildings right now. Question about live stream. So currently, cohort A goes into school, has their live classes. The cohort B's home, they start off with a class meeting, a homeroom meeting. Is that correct, Mary?
Yep.
Okay, but then after that, the at-home students are given work on their Google Classroom, and another teacher is checking in with them, not necessarily giving them the live lecture. Why can't we do live streaming for the classes that are happening in school? I know some other school districts are doing that. I know there was an answer on the frequently asked question, but can you just go a little bit deeper as to, is it a privacy issue? Is it a social media issue? Is it a union issue? Like what, why can't we make that happen?
Well, we're thinking it's, a student privacy issue, so that, that there's kids in school and as well as kids at home. So we were thinking, that was one of the reasons we were not thinking it. The other reason is that we thought of the mini lesson videos that we do have that would be asynchronous. So kids could access those videos, which would be the same videos the kids in class can also access. And that really, sometimes the in-person time is really going to be for those teachers to really check in with students. They will be giving them lessons in real time, but they also will be doing lots of checking in on kids to make sure that they're understanding the material that they're learning, both in the person time, but they're also making, when they're in person, they're also checking to see how they did with applying kind of the skills that they were learning. So the model's a little different, elementary and middle school, but that's where we're leaning. We will look into that. And then also when we were talking with the union, we will also kind of weigh into that and then be able to refine our model from there.
So we spoke with our school attorney this morning about that. And she did give us a little bit of a lead of maybe some flexibility with it, but it would get into consent forms about kids being recorded, or really locking that teacher into one location in the room where no kids could be visible. So we'll continue to have that conversation to work through those details of if it's possible, and again with the union and what their feelings are.
Yeah, because we do a media release form now, and maybe that's just modified to talk about this type of recording, because I know some schools have said they are doing it and they haven't given exact details, although I think the prep listed that was what they were going with. I know they're a private school and we're not comparing it, but Boston Public Schools mentioned that yesterday in their plan. So I'm wondering if we can just look further into that type of option, because it may make the cohort A and B, when they're home, be more engaged in the learning. I know it may be harder for the lower elementary schools because it might be harder for them to sit there and be engaged just looking at a screen, but thinking at least the middle and high school that they're old enough to maybe be engaged more. So thank you for that. Okay, we talked about that. We talked about the cleaning. The cleaning during the day is between DPW staffing. Is that on all levels of schools? Anyone?
So I tried to hear the question, but it was, is the same level of staffing and cleaning at all the schools? Was that the question, Mary Beth?
Correct, during the day.
Yes, we're setting it up so that we can do the same level of service in all the schools.
Okay, thank you. Monitoring of bathrooms, especially on the middle and high school level. There are issues with groups of kids going into the bathroom and hanging out and doing whatever they're doing that they're not supposed to be doing. Are we talking or thinking about bathroom monitors at the middle and high school?
They are definitely looking at what are the procedures that will need to be in place. To monitor the amount of students. The exact way we're doing that is still under discussion, but yes, that is definitely on the list of knowing that a procedure needs to be put into place, so that will look different than in past years for this current year.
Yeah, because if we're trying to limit the amount of touching and sharing of things, I think that's a hot spot in the middle and high schools that we have to really look at carefully and seriously. Mark, I have a question regarding COVID-19 tracing. Did we talk specifically, like if there's, we did talk about if there's a case in the schools, how it will be handled? Pretty much. Well, we talked about the busing, but is it the same for like in the classroom? So in the classroom, a student is like sick, has to go to the nurse. What happens from there?
So the question is, what happens after the student reports to the nurse and they have COVID symptoms?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose that would actually be in the guidance document that exists, but so I couldn't answer exactly. My assumption would be the parent would be notified, referred to a healthcare provider, and that's where the process begins.
Right, and then that healthcare provider reports it online to a service that then the town public health gets a report. And then at that point there, who's responsible for contacting and doing contact tracing, the school or the health department?
I believe that would be the health department. Anytime we receive a report of an infectious disease, yes.
Sure. So, all right, on the school level, we have a case. We have a case in the first grade at Smith. How are we handling, what are we doing? Are we contacting all the Smith in that first grade classroom families saying there was a case and then they become quarantined or they have to get tested? What's the process there?
So we do have the guidance, and I'll ask Keith to fill in more of the details. We have the guidance from the state that has for COVID-19 scenarios. So there are a number of different scenarios, and we would go through those, but we do need to start with that child working out from there and then making decisions from there. So as Keith said in the beginning of the presentation, we do need to consider families, our staff, everyone's confidential information at the same time, needing to give out as much information as we can. So that will be that balancing act, but the state does have for us a guidance with many different scenarios and then having a COVID separate room. So that way the child is then, or adult is separated from the rest of the school.
Right, and I meant
Anything
that
else?
as a teacher or a staff member. Yep.
Thank you.
So if there's a case and then we're saying, because I do think it was in the recommendations, for testing purposes, we say we recommend to the child, the staff, the class, you got to get tested. Who's paying for that? Because I know some programs, it says if you're exhibiting symptoms, you don't have to pay for the test. But then if you're just I guess back to Mark, where he said, I guess it depends on the situation, where the person, if they were exposed or if where they're coming from. But is there like, is someone paying for it, or are we asking families to pay for it?
There is no cost for COVID testing if it's required.
Okay, thank you. I had a question, Keith, kind of a budget question. Online subscriptions that teachers use in the classroom currently to teach, for example, Peer Deck. Some of these subscriptions have expired. Is there a plan? Do we have money to renew these subscriptions, or because of budget, are some of these subscriptions going to go by the wayside?
So that one in particular, we do thank our teachers that are eagerly ready to plan for the year. And that subscription is currently in the process of being renewed right now through Mary's office and my office. With the unknown budget picture from the state, we did put a budget freeze on from July 1st until at least August 15th, while we waited for more information to make sure that our budget was balanced. So as of August 1st, we've been working with the curriculum directors to come up with that priority list of subscriptions and items that do need to be purchased, and those purchase orders are going in this week.
Great, thank you. Worksheets for elementary level. So some of the elementary level work that is being put out for the remote learning, if we all go to remote learning, I know in the spring, teachers, posted assignments, asked the parents to print the stuff out, and that's a lot. Ink costs a lot, paper costs a lot. Is there going to be opportunities to provide these homework packets or sheets going forward?
Yep, we've, as part of Keith's, working with Keith last week, we put together the orders for the consumable workbooks that the students at the elementary level have. So they'll be getting their foundations materials, their Words Their Way, their investigations books. So we will have that. So we're thinking sometime in the beginning of September, there'll be time for people to come to school to get their, like kind of one of the drive-by kind of scenarios where we could give them materials. If we're remote, and if we're in hybrid, then they would come to school and get that material, but they could take it back and forth to school with them.
Great. Let's just go back to cleaning for a second. This has to do with, in the past, schools on the supply list, there was always like wipes, hand sanitizer, Kleenex. Some of these things are hard to come by. Are these things on the supply list? And if they can't find them, they can't bring them in. Is that going to be an issue?
So for the disinfecting and for the sanitizing, every school will have ample supplies for that. So in every hallway, there'll be multiple sanitizing locations. You'll probably see on a supply list a personal bottle that your child may want to have with them. If they don't have that, they'll always be welcome to use the one in the halls. For disinfecting, again, wipes may be on the list to help with convenience for the teacher, but every teacher will be provided with a bottle of spray disinfectant, a product called Maxima, and paper towels to use in the classroom. So the district is providing more of that for each teacher than we have in the past.
And if teachers run out of these supplies, they need to be asking for them for a refill, correct?
They'll ask their building principal, who will talk to the custodian, who will get it refilled. Yes, but they'll be refilled by the district in the town.
Let's just go back to COVID testing. I know some school, like colleges, are requiring their students that are coming back on campus to get tested, and that's different because they're living there. But they're also asking their staff that commute to get tested and frequently tested with, I think at least at one college, my son's going to a rapid type of test. Is there thoughts to do that for our staff prior, or students prior to going back to school? I know DESE did not recommend that, nor did they recommend taking temperatures because it causes a false sense of maybe they have it, but maybe they don't. So I'm just curious. Any thought?
We have not gone to that direction either. We're following the state's guidance at the moment.
I would say we can continue to listen to what the governor has to say. The governor came out yesterday, started to talk about what testing could look like for schools in a intrastate agreement where they were going to have 500,000 rapid tests that were part of a plan, but there weren't a lot of details release on that earlier this week, but Desi indicates that the governor's office and the state agencies continue to talk about that.
Okay. Busing. We talked about it a little bit. So say we start the year, people have signed up for busing, they paid their fee. The fee is going to be the same.
Yes, at this time we're proposing the fee to be the same, but we can have that discussion when we look at the transportation policy.
Sure. But not when, if whatever reason we get shut down and have to remote for a period of time, will there be a refund issued?
We would be looking for guidance from school committee about what their feelings on that are. Again, there's going to be some obligation of the district and the town to pay for busing services so that vendor is still solvent and in business for when we do need the buses. So the bills will still be there. We collect about $160,000 typically a year in fees. We do realize that that amount's going to be reduced as we reduce the capacities. So that'll be another one of those financial decisions for the committee to make.
So when you talked about finances, Keith, the different money coming in from the different things, Representative Spiliotis posted last week about some money coming to Danvers. Was that included in your report?
It was. That was the $225 per student that, unfortunately expires December 30th.
Okay. And my question was, if we start remotely and we're in the remote phase, are sports gonna run? I know the MIA posted something this afternoon. I know there was a little bit of a conflicting comment from the commissioner earlier in the week, and then the MIA said basically that's not true. So do we have any information about if we're in a remote phase, is our sports gonna happen?
Not beyond what you just said. That is the best of our knowledge. There's also been conversations of if a student elects to be full remote and the district is meeting in hybrid, would that student be eligible for sports? And I think that was one of the comments the commissioner made that has then got lumped in with a full remote of a whole district staying remote in the fall. So we still don't know. We still don't know if there's going to be a fall season or not. We're hoping that comes out in the next 2 weeks.
But if people elect homeschooling, are they still going to be allowed to participate in the sports and the extracurriculars? Because that's how it has been, correct?
That is how it's been. We would have to again ask Desi for clarification in this new environment that we're in about that.
Okay. I'm hoping that there could be some kind of creation of videos for families, faculty, students as to what going back to school is going to look like. I know some schools, and I've seen a private school do one where they did an example of when you return to school, this is how it's going to be. These are how your desks are going to be spaced. This is how you're going to sit. This is how you're going to wear a mask. This is how it's going to go in the hallway. Can we consider doing something like that with DCAT and maybe our administration or staff to really just so people can see this is how it's going to be rather than show up first day of school and everyone's like, I don't know what we're supposed to do.
Yep, that's in the works. Part of my subcommittee, the Teaching and Learning and Social Emotional Learning subcommittee, the Social Emotional Learning group is already, that was one of their things that they put forward. And I think it's in our plan that they talked about having those return to school introductory videos for families. And it's about wearing masks and what school is going to look like and kind of doing video tours through the schools and talking with teachers, interviews with teachers about what the classroom setups will look like. So that's in our plan. We also have plans for training for families, especially around Google Classroom and Google Meets and how to communicate with teachers. So we'll be doing work like that. Those will probably be virtual meetings to do with parents to try to teach them the technology that we'll be using throughout the school year.
Thank you. In social emotional learning, those meetups, because that's going to be a huge thing that we need to be on top of, considering what we've all gone through. How often do those happen? Were those happening each time they were in school, but also remotely?
it's a part of every single day, whether you're remote or you're in person. Those check-ins are daily. So at the elementary level, we use the Open Circle SEL curriculum. And then at the secondary level, in all levels, actually, we're working to integrate the 5 social emotional learning competencies into our academics and really making kind of clear, explicit connections between like what's happening in the classroom and some of the work they're doing with the competency. Like this is helping you develop, self-management, because this is like executive functioning skills and things like that. So we'll be working more of that at the secondary level, but the SAL committee has been working with a roadmap that CASEL has put out, which CASEL is the all things SEL for school districts. And it's called Reunite, Renew, and Thrive. And it really is giving us so many resources to work on the social emotional part with adults and the adults returning to school with students, and kind of like the skills that we'd be teaching with the students. So it's been they have a lot of connections with equity issues too, and some of the, anti-racism movement and things like that. They talked about how to incorporate that into some of the lessons as well. So it's an amazing resource for us. And we've been spending most of our time in that group, kind of working through that and kind of thinking about what is the roadmap for Danvers as far as social emotional learning.
And if they do the remote, if we're in hybrid and the students that are doing remote, are they going to be able to participate in the SEL meetings or meetups?
That's still, we need to work through some of those details right now. Either way, if we could try to make that happen, and if that can happen, then the remote teachers that are working with students that are on the remote cycle, they will be definitely meeting with them. So their cohort will always be meeting with one another.
Okay, yeah, I think that's important. So I just have a couple comments. Thank you for answering my questions. I know there was a lot, but thank you. Just for this to all work, and I know a lot of people want their kids back in, and I know a lot of people say they don't feel comfortable, and even staff, you've got to make the decision that's best for you and your family. But I also, as a community here, we all need to do the right thing. We all need to be listening to what we're supposed to be doing. Wear a mask, social distance, wash your hands, not hang out in large crowds. I totally understand we're all dealing with quarantine fatigue. But when I walk downtown and I see people walking, which is great, but no one has a mask. Do you not think you're going to run into someone? I walk with a mask. I see someone coming, I put it on. It's just being respectful to everyone. And again, if we want this to work, we all need to buy into it, and we need to have conversations with our kids about what the expectation is, because if they really want to get back in and see their friends and their teachers, we all have to be accountable for everything, even teachers and staff. And I really, we're in the state of Massachusetts, we're doing a lot better than other states, but yeah, the numbers are ticking up now because people are, relaxing what they think that we can do. And we really can't. We need to be mindful of everyone. And unfortunately, I'm in a situation right now where my immune system is compromised. And I have a husband who's a teacher that's going back, and I have a kid junior that's going back, and they do need to go back. So for everyone, we need to just be respectful of everyone that going through something or not, and just let's do what we're supposed to do. And that's really what I have to say right now. And I appreciate, and the decision tonight has been very hard. And I've read all the emails, and it's for every email I received that's saying we have to go back, I've received an email saying we can't go back. And it's a very hard decision for all of us, and not just here in Danvers, all school committees. So we're just trying to do the best for everyone. So thank you. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Mary Beth. And I agree, and I'm sure everyone else does. It's not an easy decision. My colleagues have asked a lot of the questions I have. I just have a few, and I'm probably beating a dead horse on this one, but David Lane on the filters. Just so I understand, you said, we can change the error out 4 times an hour if we're using like a MERV 8 filter, right? Does that decrease kind of regularly as you go up? Because you said like at 13, we can only do it twice an hour. So if we had a 10, does that mean we could do it still 4 times an hour, or how does that work?
It proportionally drops as the filter becomes higher in number and more dense. The airflow drops.
Or Rich?
So I do have a
Can
few.
you guys hear me?
Yep. I can hear you. So I have a MERV 8 will give us 4 ACHs, air change an hour. 11 is 2.5, and the 13 is 2.1. And our contractor recommends that it should be at least 2.7 air changes an hour. So as David was just saying, yes, it does. The higher up in the MERV you go, the less air change in hours you get.
Okay.
And where 13 drops us all the way to about 2.1.
Okay. And I know you said we can't get the 13s anyways until the end of the year. Do we have enough of the 8s or whatever number we need in stock?
We do.
Okay. And then one more thing for you guys. Dave, you mentioned, if we have the windows open, we can't have the AC on, which makes sense, obviously. From a COVID perspective, does using one versus the other make sense?
So as far as we're going to probably maybe defer to Mark Haleo on
Did I
that.
lose you guys?
Yeah. Can you hear me now, David?
Yes.
Okay. So Mark Haleo may want to weigh in on this. However, we believe that with the windows shut, you get better filtered air. And that's still bringing in fresh air and exhausting the air outside the building. It's doing the same thing as windows open. However, it's mechanical, so it's actually changing that air over and filtering it.
Yeah, if you wanted me to chime in, I would agree with that.
Okay, thank you. In terms of sports, Mary Beth just touched on that. I can't imagine that we'll have sports this fall, unfortunately. With colleges not playing. But if we do have them, I think we would need to have our remote learners be able to participate. And I'm getting a message that my voice is cutting out. Can you guys hear me?
It's iffy, Mr. Chairman. It's not the best.
Okay. I don't know how to change that because I haven't done anything. I haven't moved since we started at 7.
I mean, we can
There's
hear
a
you, you're
way,
just
or-
cutting in and out.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Question for the administrators. Are we able to look at the different levels of education differently? For example, could we have elementary, especially the early elementary, in school potentially more often, and then do remote, for example, or hybrid at the high school and middle school levels? Or does everything have to be the same?
Good. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. There are possibilities. We have been looking at K to 12 together. I think as the data continues to evolve, studies continue to evolve. So we try to have that most current information with looking at, the needs of different age levels. And it seems like for every answer we try to, or problem solve, we come up with an answer, there ends up 5 to 10 other things that we need to think about. So we'll continue those conversations, but we really have been looking at a K to 12 approach for our schools.
Okay. And Mary Beth touched on this as well, and you answered some of it. But I hope that we could look into the synchronous teaching for students that are remote. So if I'm in school on Monday and Tuesday and I'm remote on Thursday and Friday, I'm getting the same information at the class, all those days. I would think it would move the education along faster. So I just want to find that you're going to, or hear that you're going to look into that further.
Yes. So
Okay. I don't know if I should try to switch computers because obviously something's going on. I got a message saying my connection was unstable.
We can still hear you and see you.
Yes, please. I'm going to try and grab another laptop real quick. You can. Okay. In terms of the state model, do we have the ability to choose which vendor we want to go with, or is that decided by the state, or is it a first come first serve model? How does that work?
No, I know we began by saying it's a state sponsored, and the more we learned yesterday, it really was looking at vendors. So the state, in supporting school districts of needing that support, that as individual school districts, we weren't most likely be able to run a full remote option, and our being fluid between in-person, hybrid, and remote. So the state was supporting school districts by reaching out, getting the vendors, getting options for us. Similar to at the moment, today's conversation was districts are having a difficulty getting Chromebooks. So the state can step in and try to help to put something statewide together. They also helped with PPE materials. So we're finding that the remote learning full-time option is similar to that. So they were able to get state contracts to save us the ability to save us and to be more efficient in having to go out and do our individual contracts. So now there are 2 vendors and 2 of the state virtual schools. So there's basically 4 options that we can be looking at. We just have to decide now that we have that information as of yesterday, decide which one matches best for Danvers, and then start to work with that vendor.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I'm trying to find the meeting link so I can log in on another computer to see if that will help. Anyone else on the committee have any other follow-up questions? Well,
I do, Mr. Chairman, if I could. And so first of all, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I'm going to assume you gave me the go-ahead. All right, Mary, and maybe Lisa too. So if we were to do the hybrid model, the students are going to be in school physically 2 days a week.
Mhm.
You got lunches, you got coming and going. Are we talking something like 10 to 12 actual hours of education in those 2 days? That about right?
Yep.
Okay.
A bit more. Yeah.
Now we have, and this really is, again, for Mary, Lisa in particular, we've pretty much, you've told us that the idea of bringing the students back full-time every day is really not feasible. That's off the table.
Mm-hmm.
So the realistic options are hybrid or full remote to start. Would it be fair to say that you can, in fact, make either of those propositions work? You can deliver the educational product either by the hybrid, have the students there a couple of days a week. But if we have to go remote, you feel you can still deliver a robust educational product.
Yes, and that really has been since the commissioner has directed each district to come up with the 3 models. that really has been the focus. And we do believe that the hybrid and the remote will give that strong education for our students in either model.
Either way. Okay. And one of the things starting out was that the commissioner asked us to consider sort of lean toward bringing the kids back in some way. Did that influence your recommendation of which plan from the administrative level?
I wouldn't say about the leaning toward. It was right. We needed to make a decision because we need to start somewhere.
Sure.
So in working with the state and reviewing all of our pieces, working with our committees, the pieces of working collaboratively and having that flexibility, we are recommending the hybrid to begin to start to get students and staff back. But again, school committee will be voting, and there are we have the three options, which really are two at the moment because it's remote and hybrid that we can really do. We can need to be fluid between. So both of those plans are ready to go.
Okay.
I mean, by ready to go, ready to then start to implement the more specific details.
And from an educational standpoint, you'd be comfortable either way.
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure if I would say comfortable with the piece, but each of them are ready to be implemented, and we are ready to go with each of those plans.
Okay, thank
Our
you.
priority is to get students and staff back to school. It's what will be the timing to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Could I just follow up on that, Dave? Do that? Okay. So I have heard from the beginning from everybody that's involved that it is always that it's always preferable to have in-person learning versus remote learning. Has that changed at all?
No, I mean, education has been for years, it's been in person. And
Okay.
what we've been talking about, the SEL pieces in person is where we eventually need to get back to.
And obviously, if they were both the same and they worked equally, then we could just shut down all the buildings. The town would be happy, would get rid of all the costs that involved and just do remote for time immemorial. But that isn't really what we want, I'm assuming, and that the better option is to get the kids in school. If all other things considered, it makes sense, correct?
Yes.
That's it. Thanks.
I feel like I'm trying a case against you, Arthur.
With the two attorneys, yes.
Okay, and I am back. Can you guys
Yeah.
hear me better now?
Much
Yeah,
better.
beautiful.
Better.
All right. I'm on my cell phone instead of a laptop, so apologize for that. I believe you answered all my questions. So anyone else on the committee have any additional questions regarding this discussion? I'll take that as a no. So would anyone like to make a motion?
Well, yeah, I'll make a motion. I'm going to move that the Danvers Public Schools open on September 16th, 2020, using a remote-only learning model outlined in the Danvers Public School Plan dated August 20th, 2020. Included in the motion would be approving the plan, with the exception of deciding to start on a fully remote model. I further move that the school committee would meet in October, either through a regular meeting or a special meeting, for the purpose of reviewing the conditions that then exist in Massachusetts and Danvers regarding the COVID-19 virus, and to determine whether those conditions would allow us to then move to a hybrid return to school for all students, with a target for that change, if we decide to do that, of November 9th, 2020. I'm hoping I can get a second at least for discussion.
I'll second that. I may not agree, but I'll second it.
Appreciate that, Arthur. Thank you.
And before we move on, would it make sense to let Dave, Mark, and Rich depart? I don't think they need to stay unless they really want to. Would you guys agree with that?
Sure, I think that's fine.
Yep.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate your input. Very valuable. So now we can move on to discussion. for Eric's motion.
Since I've made the motion, I'd like to speak to it first, if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. And I have, I'll try not to read all of this. There's a lot. But I wanted to begin, first of all, I think as everybody has said, in the 20 years I've been in the school committee, no issue has engendered so much comment, so much thought, so many parents, so many teachers all reaching out to us. And I was struck by the fact that there's a real recognition that we have a difficult task ahead of us. Making this decision is not easy. And I appreciate the fact that those who've reached out to us understand that. We've heard from parents who really want to get their students back in school for a number of reasons. We've heard of parents who definitely don't want to get their students back in school. A few have even changed their mind one way or the other over the last week or two. We've heard from teachers who desperately want to be back with their students, but not at the if it's endangering the physical health of themselves, their family, or their students. Teachers and others are quite aware of the emotional impact that either not coming back to school would have on students and the social and emotional learning piece, but also in some cases, what would be the emotional impact of having students, particularly young students, come back to school in ways that look so different than anything they've experienced before, with teachers and peers wearing masks and being told to keep the mask on except for breaks and avoiding their peers. If there was any possible position that could work for everyone, I think that all of us would embrace that position. Like all of us, I've been reading and researching issues around COVID-19 and reopening of schools for weeks, if not months, trying to understand as best I can everything that we have to try and sort of weigh in the balance here as we decide what to do. The motion I presented reflects what I feel is the best path for us as we sit here today on August 5th, 2020, for the safety and education of the students during what amounts to a 6-odd-week period that I've outlined. The other thing I want to emphasize right away is that I think Lisa, Keith, Mary, and your entire team of administrators, the teachers, the staff, the parents, everybody who worked on those reopening plans, really have done your job with excellence. Your plan is one that you should all be proud of, whatever we decide in the end. You've tried to address the educational point, the social piece, the safety, I think, as well as anyone could. And you have, in effect, created 2 really good choices out of a bad situation. So my feeling that even though your recommendation may be to open in a hybrid model, I prefer that we start in a fully remote model, only reflects what I think the reality of the circumstances around us is, and is not a reflection on the quality of your work or plan, which I both think are excellent. So I hope you know that, and I really appreciate everything that you have done. And I think you've provided a roadmap for success in either direction. So the reasons I believe that we should open remotely are giving great weight to the following factors. There are a significant number of families in which either a multi-generational or a parent or a child has a potential that they may be potentially more susceptible to the virus, more susceptible to a bad outcome if they get the virus. There's also a number of families, people I heard from, where you have grandparents who are heavily providing childcare while parents are out. And again, if we go back on a hybrid model, that's going to have to be dealt with, or parents are going to have to choose to that state-sponsored model that we don't really know that much about right now, but does, at least on its face, present some issues of continuity with our curriculum. And I don't think that's a great or equitable way to deliver the education. And this is, I think, a little more important to me when I think that I feel like we're going to find more than 10% of the parents, or 12% that we anticipated in our initial survey, are going to opt to keep their children home. So I'm deeply concerned that we deliver an equitable education product. COVID cases in Massachusetts have slowly begun to rise again. Right now, they're not out of control, but we've all seen recently in the Globe and in the news generally, more and more health professionals are talking about slowing down our opening, moving back to phase 2 potentially. You heard our director of health say that it's the ability to turn around tests is even slowing down a little bit. We've seen a slight bump in Danvers, and when I say slight, I mean like 7 cases to 12. I'm not trying to say there's a trend, but the air is not favorable right now to where this virus is going, especially given the predictions by health professionals that the fall could very well see a rebound. It's the premise of DESE when they asked us to sort of consider, sort of take our eyes toward getting the students back. We all agree it's better to be able to deliver education in person. We all get that. But part of DESE's thought process was that young people are less likely than older persons to get the virus. They're less likely to spread the virus. But actually, the best science we have now is that students between the ages of 10 and 18 actually can spread the virus as efficiently as adults can. And 350,000 Americans under the age of 18 have been diagnosed with the virus. There's at least some evidence that persons even younger than 10 carry a higher viral load, which gives pause to me as a possible spread potential. So, and again, kind of what Mary Beth said, I've gone downtown. You're right, you go downtown and you see people walking and they're walking without masks or jogging without masks. They're walking in pairs and you get the feeling they're not necessarily family members. They're standing out in front of Dunkin' Donuts chatting with each other. You do see people with the masks just below the nose. And our health director pointed out you're getting a lot of calls about this. So I wonder if we're getting complacent. And again, it worries me that what will happen is we will attempt to open the schools on a hybrid basis for the purpose of getting roughly 10 to 12 actual educational in-person hours, and then having cases that could involve our students or our staff, making them feel that they are at risk, making other community members at risk, perhaps increasing the overall number of cases in Danvers for a return that doesn't quite seem worth it, at least in the beginning. Lisa, you've pointed out we can indeed deliver a product and education to these students by a fully remote, and I am asking for us to do that for just 6 weeks to begin with, and then take a look at what's happening, see what's happening in other school districts, see what's happening around the town, see what's happening around the state. What I don't want to see is to see us start with a hybrid, get the students used to that, then have to go back to a remote, then still later on go back to a hybrid again. I just don't want to see us bouncing around. I think we should take this in a step-by-step approach based on what I think is the best way to keep our students and staff safe. I've thought about this a long way, and honestly, I don't have a doubt that everyone in our town departments, the DPW, that the teaching staff, that all of us will do what we can to try and make this successful, to try and keep safe, to try and keep the air clean, to try and keep the buildings clean. My concern is that even with all of those efforts, the odds may be against us in doing that. And I think we have to think long and hard before we are willing to accept a staff member or student or their family getting sick. So therefore, and I do this, I also have tried to balance the very real concerns that people have expressed in terms of needing to get back to work. Students who really need to get back to school, who do better when they're face-to-face, who do better when they're with their teachers, who miss their peers. I completely understand that. I understand that a lot of students get mental health services and that in-person learning is the most effective way to do it. Those concerns are valid, they're real, and I feel for the parents who have expressed those, and I've considered them before I came to this ultimate point. I just think that for the first 6 weeks, to take a very cautious approach is going to keep all of us more healthy and more safety, particularly our staff and students. I think time is our ally here in terms of knowing what's going to to go on. I recognize also that my fellow members of the school committee may feel differently. I know how hard you have all worked and all tried to learn as much as you could about this. And I respect what a difficult decision it is for all of us. And whatever we ultimately decide to do, I'll back it and try and help in any way I can. But honestly, I believe opening remotely for the first 6 weeks is the way to go. And that's the reason for my motion. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Mary Beth?
Thank you, Eric. Yes, it was, this has consumed me at least the last 2 weeks, seeing everything in the news and the emails. And yes, I've gone back and forth on this. And again, I've thought about it one way and then I've thought about it the other way. Unfortunately, I feel hybrid is the way we should at least try to go back to school. These kids have been in quarantine since March. It has definitely done some mental things to a lot of children, not being able to see some friends. I totally understand that. Even in my household, it has been challenging. The remote learning was not great in spring. We understand that. We totally know why it was, thrust upon everyone. I do believe going forward, we're going to have a better and more robust remote learning. I do believe that. But I think a lot of kids need to get back in and make some connections with teachers that they have missed. I know social distancing, people say you're not going to be able to socialize, but you could still certainly talk to someone that's 6 feet away. We do it now out in public. And I would really like to try to see us get back into at least hybrid to just make some connections when and if we have to go back into a transition of a remote learning. Maybe the expectations set forth by teachers early on in a hybrid would be better for students, because parents definitely struggled with teaching at home. I know kids have gone back to softball and baseball and having, practices and or games and socially distanced and doing that. And yes, the work, parents do have to work, and there's childcare issues, and those issues aren't just, it's daycares are only taking so many. I mean, there's a childcare issue in the state. So for fully remote, it does put a burden on families that are working, even essential workers, and the concern of, well, I have to take time off. Like, what are people supposed to do? They have to work. Some people, because their jobs are back, they're not laid off anymore and they have to go back. So, but I think for the mental and at least the learning aspect for students, a hybrid model would be best at this time. But again, I went back and forth on this. I totally understand. I've read articles, I've seen the news reports, and some of the schools in the other states didn't do it right. They, were full immersion, and I've talked to people in other states and I've talked to other school committee. This is a difficult decision for all of us, but at this time, I would not be able to support a fully remote start. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Jeff?
Well, I was kind of waiting for Arthur, who's got his 2 columns there ready to refute every one of Eric's points like a good lawyer. So I guess we'll save the fun for the end. I'm going to comment specifically on the motion. And I'll reiterate a couple of things that I said. First of all, my focus is on, inside and indoor questions, because I believe that is where the focus needs to be, and it needs to be in the classroom, and it needs to be on the quality and whether or not we feel a level of comfort in the recommendations that the Department of Education has told us, that our town engineers have told us, that our school leaders have told us is the recommendation and is appropriate. So that's the default. As far as the other data, the issue that I have with a motion like this is I'm still not hearing what specific metrics would be in place that are different than today to go to a hybrid option or to go to a full open option. And that's why I asked the question last week, which said, or whenever we met last, what would it take to have a full open scenario? And for various reasons, the answer was a vaccine. Okay, that is simple, that is definitive. I understand that, right? What I'm still not hearing in this motion is, you know, waiting a few weeks, let's see what's happening. That's not good enough. We have to have something that says if you're going to open remotely, this is what needs to happen in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and whatever it is. I don't, you know, I can react to that, but I can't react to something that's just, you know, very, very general like that. So if there was something, you know, that had more of that ability, I would support it. Some of the other things, right, which we're really thinking about, and which I'm thinking about on this is, you know, the 10 to 12 hours that we're talking about, whether it's 10 hours, 5 hours, 1 hour, it's still 40% of the educational time that students have. It's 2 days a week. And so, you know, the thought is 40% of the time to be live must outweigh the value of 40% remote, right? It has to outweigh it, because if they are the same and they are equivalent, then we would do remote, right? We would absolutely do remote. But given what everyone has told us about social emotional learning, particularly for our younger learners, particularly among special education students, you know, and the recommendations of what the Department of Education is saying, that in their view, given the ability to make the schools as safe as we possibly can, that 40% of time is worth doing this. And so those are my comments on the motion right now.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Arthur.
Thanks, Dave. So, I mean, obviously, I want to just say a couple of things that everybody else has said, which is that I know that it's a difficult issue for everyone, and I know that, you know, and we all know that there's not a perfect choice in this situation, and while you know, 90% of the time Eric and I agree, this is one of those times that we don't agree, but really only, you know, as to maybe I think we all agree we want to do the best for the kids. We just have a little bit of a different look at what might work right here. And what I looked at this week is, and I did read all the comments, the emails, and what I looked at most was I wanted to see the full plan, to see how this was all going to work, get more details about how we were going to deal with everything. And then also I really took a lot of time going through the Massachusetts COVID statistics website, what's been going on for the past 4 or 5 months. And I was actually surprised by what I saw relative to, it really helped me come to the conclusion that I think we need to go back to, we need to go with the hybrid. And so it really was interesting to see what I saw. You know, I looked at the indicators that they look at every day, and the difference between now and April 15th, which is, you know, when we were deciding whether or not we should stay closed or not. I mean, positive tests were 32% on April 15th. They're 2.1 yesterday. Hospitalized patients were 384 yesterday. They were 3,726 on April 15th. That's down 89%. The positive test is down 93%. The deaths are down 92%. The cases were 162 today, and on April 15th, it was well over 2,000. I mean, it's everything is down 90+%. And then I went and I looked at what has happened since June 30th, because I think that was an important date to look at, because that's when, just before we started stage 3, that's when the gyms opened, that's when the restaurants opened, that's when people started going to beaches. The protests were happening at that particular time. We had one in Danvers, stores open fully, malls, kids are starting to play Little League. other sports, a lot more was going on. And so when I looked at that, I was really surprised to see what I saw. And if you look at that, since June 30th, so 37 days ago, in the age group of 0 to 19, 29 people have been hospitalized, and of course, there's been no deaths. So that's out of a population of 1,525,000, 0 to 19. So we had 29 hospitalized out of 1,525,000, one out of every 52,500. Age 20 to 29, 28 hospitalized out of 1,050,000, 2 deaths. One out of every 37,500 was hospitalized. Okay. For age 30 to 39, 46 hospitalized out of 913,000 people, one out of every 20,000. And it just continues to go on like that. I looked at the age group of 0 to 50 in the state of Massachusetts from June 30th to today. 152 people in the ages of 0 to 50 have been hospitalized out of 4,340,000 residents in that age group. That's hospitalized, one out of every 28,553 people. And for that same group, there have been 15 deaths out of 4,340,000. That's one out of every 290,000 between 0 and 50. So the reason I'm saying all this is because if we're going to close schools, we're going to shut the doors and not let people in, we got to have a high bar, okay? And certainly, you know, I mean, anybody that gets sick, anybody obviously that passes away, that's a terrible thing, but it happens in all parts of life. If you go to other, if you go to this Massachusetts demographic websites, that you can see that obviously the likelihood of serious injury or death in a car is much higher than what we're seeing right now with this since June 30th. And again, that's since everything opened, and that's since things started happening. The last thing is that the mass positive rate over the last 14 days, again, from the website, is 1.82. That's the last 14 days. The Danvers positive rate for the last 14 days is 1.4. So what am I getting at? I'm getting at that if we can't go back now, I don't know, we're not going back until we have a vaccine or we have no disease. And I can't support taking that option away from our students and the families who overwhelmingly do want to go back. And I also trust them to be the arbiters of what's good for their families. And you know, Eric's point is good about the multi-generational, but again, I go back to the family has to make that decision. And if they have to stay home, they have to stay home. Saying that, obviously we have to do the best that we can as far as the teachers are concerned, and you guys will have to negotiate that. And I mean, obviously anybody that has any type of health condition which requires them not to be here, they can't be here. And I also think, and I've said this before, and maybe, you know, I shouldn't say it now, but they should not be penalized if they're out for COVID purposes. So if they have COVID symptoms, or they think they might have it, or they have to quarantine or any of that, I just don't think that should affect their benefits, for two reasons. Number one, it's fair. And number two, we want them to be incentivized not to come in, not to try to push through it. So, you know, those types of things have to be determined. And Keith mentioned impact bargaining. Obviously that has to be done, but we really need to get them back. And I just don't think if the stats showed me that it was like it was in April, then I'd be fully with Eric on this, or even twice as what they are now. But you know, I just can't at this point, you know, and you know, we'll see what happens, but I'm you know, it's been looking good for a while, and I think it'll stay good. I agree with you guys about the vigilance that has to happen. But again, if we don't go back now, I don't know when we're going to go back. So I would not support Eric's motion, but I would support going back hybrid. And that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Arthur. Yeah, it's not an easy decision. I think Mary Beth said, you know, and I completely agree. And I said this in some of my responses to my emails, that for every email that made incredibly valid points about going remotely, I had the next email that made incredibly valid points about being back in school. Really, really challenging decision here. And I believe, well, a couple things. I believe we're probably going to be forced at some point to go remote by the state. So I think a lot of this effort that we're doing is probably for naught, but I think it's important that we've gone through this. My agreement on the hybrid model last week was based on statistics in the fact that I believe it was 84% of the families that we surveyed said that they wanted to come back to school, either full-time or in a hybrid model. And a lot of the emails that I got, people had changed their mind one way or the other. And some of those emails said that the survey was not clear, that the way they interpreted it was different from the way that they thought the question was. So I would like us to send out another survey on Monday, if possible, simply asking one question. And that question is, do you want your child or children to go back using the hybrid model now that we know the details, that it's going to be 2 days in school, 3 days remote, or do you want your children to go remote? Because we have more time to make decisions. We can make a decision tonight. Obviously, we have to vote tonight, but that vote can be changed at our meeting on the 24th or whenever is appropriate. The thing I like about Eric's motion is that it gives us time. It gives parents time to, get childcare. It gives teachers time to prep and administrators time to focus, because their focus has been on 3 different models, 2 different models primarily. If I was going to support the delay in going back hybrid and starting on remote, which I'm not opposed to, it would be with a few conditions that Eric did mention. One would be very important that all teachers be in the classroom. I think they should be teaching from their classrooms, not from their homes. The technology is available for them there with support if needed. They'd have the supplies at their fingertips. And it gives the students who are logging in remotely kind of a sense of a classroom and a sense of normalcy. I think that's important. We would need to provide for some in-school opportunities for special populations that Mary had talked about, similar to what we've done this summer. And if we were going to start start remotely, I would like to evaluate that earlier. I would look at a 4-week evaluation period and see where we are with numbers and how things are working, and then move, immediately. That would bring us to, I think it was October 14th. I don't see why, if we have this flexibility and fluidity, that we couldn't be in school in a hybrid model on the following Monday, the 19th, instead of waiting until early to mid-November.
I would be okay with any of those changes to my motion.
So I think
All
we
right,
need to vote on the motion.
We need to vote on the motion, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Have you noticed the meeting by Zoom?
Sorry, what was that?
I said, has anyone noticed that we're making this decision while we ourselves are meeting by Zoom?
Yeah, because it's August.
Yeah, no, it's a valid point, Eric. We're talking about going back in person when we are meeting remotely.
I don't want it. I mean, I want everybody to be safe, but I digress.
We all do, absolutely. So for Eric's motion as is, I won't. Do you want to reread it, Eric, just so we're clear?
Boy.
Or summarize it?
Yeah. In summary, I'm proposing that we move we approve the superintendent's plan to return to school, with the exception that school starts on September 16th, fully remote, in the manner that's outlined for the remote learning model in the school plan. And then my motion read that we would meet then in October for the purpose of reviewing the conditions in Massachusetts and in Danvers regarding the COVID-19 virus, and determine whether we could then move to a hybrid model.
Okay, great. So now, based on the way we're meeting here, I will call out looking for a yay or nay from each person individually. Mary Beth Berry?
No.
Jeff Kay?
No.
Arthur Skarmas?
Nope.
Okay.
So we have a majority there. I would, or Eric Crane, obviously made the
Yes.
motion, so that's a yes. And I will vote no, because it doesn't require the things I mentioned just a few minutes ago. So we need another motion on the table.
I'll make a motion that we approve the superintendent's plan to go back to school in the hybrid model commencing on September 16th.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Discussion on that.
I think
Eric.
I've already made my points, so I won't belabor them.
Okay. Just
I
want to
just
give
wanna-
everyone a chance to speak. Eric.
I just want to thank everybody for considering my motion. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mary Beth, any comments?
No, I think I stated earlier where I stood. Thank you.
Okay. And Jeff, any comments?
No additional comments. Thank you.
Okay. So we will vote on Arthur's motion, which is return to school on the hybrid model on September 16th. Mary Beth Berry,
Yes.
Jeff Kay,
Yes.
Eric Crane,
No.
Arthur Skarmas,
Yes.
and I am going to vote no as well. So the motion does carry with a 3-2 vote. So we will be starting remote learning, at least as of now. Starting hybrid learning as of now on September 16th. Our next part of our meeting here is some of our policies. Lisa, do you want to start off with those?
Yes, and first want to say thank you to the committee. And in moving forward, we have policies. There are 4 of them. We did meet with the policies subcommittee on Monday to review all of the policies, and which included Dave Thompson and Arthur Skarmas, who both moved forward these policies for the full committee to review. So I'd ask Keith for the first one on transportation to give the overview of that for the committee.
As we discussed at our last meeting, transportation capacities for the upcoming year are greatly reduced in order to keep conditions safe. We did do our family survey, and the first page of this document shows the data from that really there was a consistent need from grades K through 12. The second page of this shows that reduced capacity and the configuration of students sitting sitting every row, but every other seat kind of alternating to keep them as far away as possible. You also got to see a video of what that looked like earlier tonight. The third page shows that for our 77 passenger buses that will be able to have 25 students ride, which is about 32% capacity of where they're run at. The next page shows our revised transportation policy, a draft. In that draft, you'll see that students living more than 2 miles from school in grades K to 12 are prioritized. Under the state law, only students in grades K to 6 are required by law to be transported. So this is a little bit broader in a K to 12, supporting that environment. And then based on capacities, families will have the opportunity to also register for the bus, and then there'll be a random lottery selection for what that wait list looks like for capacity. As we get into some of our surveys about returning to school, one of the questions will be, do you need transportation? So that way we can balance the cohorts of who needs transportation and who doesn't. You'll see the main revision to the actual policy itself is that our old policy had tiers that all kindergarten students would be eligible for the bus. And then it was 1 mile from the school for grades 1 to 3, and then 4 to 6 was 1.5 miles, and 7 to 12 was 2 miles. So our new revised policy would be all students, grades K to 12, living more than 2 miles from the school, as well as then changing the policy to include language around all students being required to wear masks, being required to sit in assigned seats, and that if they did not adhere to those policies, transportation could be canceled.
Great. Thanks, Keith. So as Keith mentioned, Arthur and I sat in as the policy members of the committee. Would love to get everyone's thoughts. Jeff, you want to start?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, so this is the recommendation that you and Arthur had, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right, so you both approve this. So, I mean, it makes sense. It's you know, it gets to the earlier question that I had around, you know, who were sort of enforcing these rules? What are the ramifications if these things don't happen? It sounds like most things have been thought of on that. And Keith, I appreciate you talking a little bit before about, you know, who town employees versus the bus company employees as well. And so I don't think there's any differentiation there. So, you know, from a transportation perspective, I'm fine with it. That's fine.
Okay, great. Mary Beth?
Policy looks good. I had a question that I guess I think I had it for earlier, but did someone ask about bus monitors? I know we've talked about the bus drivers being the responsible, but is there an opportunity for bus monitors on the buses, maybe at least for the elementary level?
So that is definitely something we can explore. Obviously, as we talked about budget challenges earlier, there is no budget to be paying for bus monitors. Our drivers over the years have done a nice job of balancing, you know, trying to manage student behaviors while keeping their focus on the road. And it's a practice that they're used to. So I would say from our point of view is that we would be hopeful the committee would support trying to start the year without bus monitors. And then if it was needed, like we make other staffing changes throughout the year, we would look to add that position and try to find the funding for it.
Yeah, I rode a bus for 9 years, from kindergarten through 8th grade. So I do know what goes on buses, and I'm sure it hasn't really changed too much over the years. But even if it was maybe like in one of the aides that, you know, comes in early, leaves early, I don't know, is that something that maybe you can look at as well? You know, some aides come in and do breakfast. So maybe that's a possibility, at least maybe in the beginning, just to get everyone on board, like this is how it's going to roll. And then maybe it's something that can transition off once kids understand.
We can explore that. And again, right, it is going to be a firm policy that masks are required. So if a student doesn't wear their mask, transportation will be stopped and their parents will need to drive them to school, right? Similar to the mask policy for in school.
Yep. No, that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Eric?
No, if you and Arthur have looked at this and see it as the correct policy, I'm willing to support it.
Great. Arthur, any other additional comments?
No, I think Keith went through it pretty well.
Very
Very
well.
actually.
I agree. So I will do a roll call vote. All those in favor, Arthur Skarmas,
Yes.
Eric Crane,
Yes.
Jeff Kay,
Yes.
Mary Beth Berry,
Yes.
and myself, yes. So the motion passes. Our next is, what is our next one? Sorry, I'm trying to work from my phone and my computer. Lisa, can you help me with that?
The next one is the COVID-19 handbook addendum for masks.
Great, thank you.
And Lisa could have helped you if I remembered to turn off the my unmute. So thank you, Eric. Right in there.
Team effort.
I will ask Keith to do this one also in working with the principals and our administrative team to put this one together. Thank you.
So working through the first page of this document, this is just an excerpt from the DESE and Commonwealth of Massachusetts guidelines, which says that masks are required for grades 2 to 12 and highly recommended for grades pre-K to 1. The second page is our SEL competencies. So as we get into the question of how do you interact with students who aren't wearing their masks or take their masks off, this is always the core of how we interact with kids around conversation. So just reminding everyone of that. And the bottom is our actual DPS protocol to ensure masks are worn. You'll see here that we did add that masks will be required for all students. So the Danvers Public Schools require all students in preschool, kindergarten, and first grade to wear a mask. This increases the safety of the learning and working environment for both students and staff. Again, after reviewing it with Mary Tatum and her staff from the summer program, we've had great success with getting our younger learners to wear masks consistently. So we're fairly confident we'll be able to have this work as well in the hybrid model with mask breaks built in. You'll see then we do walk through one of the questions that we got from faculty and others is, what does it look like if a student doesn't wear their mask? So the faculty and staff would verbally prompt the student. If the student does not wear the mask, they contact the office. The administrator comes up and will escort the student back to the office so they can work in a safe environment, most likely in that COVID room. Upon arrival, the principal will talk to the student, the nurse will talk to the student. If there's still a refusal, the parents will be called to pick up the student from school and the child will be dismissed.
Great, thanks, Keith. Arthur, any comments on that?
No, I think the only thing that the really major change is just the preschool to one, and the way that it was explained to us. I think they've had some experience. Keith, you've had experience with the younger kids, and it seemed to have worked. And obviously, again, there's going to have to be some flexibility with the younger kids, and you'll have to maybe prod them occasionally. But I think the more masks, the better. So I think it makes sense, and I think that's why we agree with it.
Great, Mary Beth.
No, no real questions, just comments that, masks do work. It has been shown, so it's really being respectful to everyone else, keeping everyone else safe. So no problems with the policy as is at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
No, I agree with the policy as well. And then at the bottom of the policy also, it mentions, what if a student doesn't leave the classroom? What if they don't follow reasonable directions or use disrespectful language? So that follows, and those are issues that are already in the handbook, right? So, there is some additional language that would follow if some of that would happen. I would hope that wouldn't happen. I mean, it might, but at least there is a policy regarding that as well. And so I am fine with how this is written as well.
Great, thank you. Eric?
I do like that we're extending the mask mandate to all students, and that makes sense. So I'll support the policy.
Great, thank you. Yes, as Keith said, it seemed to be working fine in the summer program. And I guess you have to get used to it at some point. So that's why we felt it was important for all students in the district to wear masks. So with that, we will take a vote. Eric Crane?
Aye.
Mary Beth Berry?
Yes, aye.
Jeff Kay?
Yes.
Arthur Skarmas?
Yes.
I am a yes as well. So the mask policy passes. And we will move on to the 2020-2021 school calendar.
Thank you. Yes. So I'll review this with you based on our recommendation of hybrid. This is built around beginning with that. The commissioner has changed the days for students this year to 170 versus 180 with the requirement that the 10 days are used before the school year and that school must start by September 16th unless you were to look at a waiver. So we do want to begin school on September 16th. That would look at having 8 days that are through September 2nd through the 15th. We would be looking at the other 2 days for preparation of coming back to school with a day from August 10th through September 1st or September 4th to be able to have teachers come in at their on their schedule to set up their classroom. And then also another day of remote PD that they would be able to, would be a self-paced day on their own, and they could do it in different chunks. So that's how we would get the 10 days of prep. From there, we would begin with that 16th, 17th, and 18th, and we'll be giving more details at the next meeting, but that would begin that transition back to school. We did account for the Monday holidays, at least through this calendar year, through December into January, by putting the 3 professional days that were part of our teacher contract, moving them into the school year, which would give us some flexibility to have a day to regroup, revisit pieces, revise anything that we need to do, and also help to balance out when there is a Monday holiday. So that was one of the major questions of the hybrid model on the Monday holiday. We did keep early releases. You'll see pieces in there that are part of our standard because those are part of the contract, and we will work through those on those Wednesdays also to see what that would look like. We also accounted for the Thanksgiving in December. Again, these are, we're getting into months that could be looking different, but we're going to give you what we know of at this time. In a hybrid model, we would look at, instead of having only cohort A come for the Monday, Tuesday, we would have cohort A come on Monday, cohort B come on Tuesday, and we will give parents, we will be explaining all of this to parents. And I think those are the major pieces for the beginning of school year in a hybrid model. Then in looking at the snow days, you see that there are no 5 days to hold at the end. The commissioner has said for this year, because we need to be fluid going back between hybrid and remote, that when there is a snow day, we can have that as one of our remote days and count that for our 170 days. So you don't see that at the end. The other piece that we do have in there is the state has passed a new holiday, Juneteenth, and that would be the June 19th, but we believe that the holidays then are accounted for the day before when it falls on a Saturday. So you see that on the 18th of the calendar. So those are the major highlights for this revised calendar.
Great. Thanks, Lisa.
You're
Arthur, anything to add from a policy subcommittee standpoint?
No, once again, Lisa explained it. I mean, it's a little bit of a manipulating around things and moving things to account for the 2 and 2 and everything, and then making sure the days are even. But I think we've got it now to work us through. And I think we really talked about, we're really looking towards, the first half of the year with this, and then we may have to obviously deal with the calendar again when we come up to second part of the year.
Right. Eric?
No, the end of the snow day, I guess. But other than that, no, it looks great. Thank you.
For this year, the end of the snow day.
Yes, there you go.
Jeff?
Yeah, no, same comments. I mean, there's a little bit of flexibility, but not a whole lot of flexibility in what we can do. So, anything that we would do would just be moving a couple things around. So I'm fine with it as it is.
Great. Mary Beth?
All set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, sorry. The 16th, 17th, and 18th are transition days. What, can you just explain a little bit? What's involved with the transition day? Half day, early release? Like, I don't.
So in our normal year, we have those as the early release days. So we're showing those as sort of the transition days. We will get back with more details. And again, in the impact bargaining, talking with our Teachers Association to just work out some of those details.
Okay.
But we do know that we need some transition. So those we highlighted as transition at this moment.
Okay.
And more details to come.
And as we discussed too, obviously we have to allot for the 2 different cohorts on those 2 days, because normally the first cohort wouldn't be going on those 2 days. So I think that's how we're going to work that out too.
Yep. Thank you. Makes sense. Thank you. No other questions. Thank you.
Great. So we've had our discussion. Looking for a vote to approve the 2020-2021 school calendar. Eric Crane?
Aye.
Jeff Kay?
Yes.
Arthur Skarmas?
Yes.
Mary Beth Berry?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well, so the calendar passes.
Great, thank you. We have one more policy for this evening, the last item on our agenda, a town travel policy that we would like the school committee to also consider for employment. So in HR piece, we'll ask Keith to come back and explain this one.
So in conjunction with Governor Baker's latest revised travel policy for the state of Massachusetts, this is a policy outlining for all the town employees kind of the same expectations that they would disclose to the town, not even the exact location of where they're traveling, but if they are to travel, whether they're going to an area which is on the approved list or not. And if they go to an area which is not on the approved list, that they will quarantine upon return or have a negative test before they return to work. A little bit about this is there is a federal act that allows the first time that you need to quarantine for a reason like this, that no sick days are used, and that you complete the quarantine with your full pay, working remotely if you can, and then subsequent times there's a little bit more leeway in that based on the federal law.
Great, thanks, Keith. I just have a question on this that I don't think we talked about when we talked in policy. The folks that do travel, and it's obviously going to happen, to do the test, is that something we can have some control over from a timing standpoint, like either the school nurses or the public health nurse in town administer that test so we get the results more quickly than we might if they're going to some external site?
We would have to ask Mark Carleo, but I've not heard of locally being able to do that test. There is some language in here that if it's an emergency, there is some even more additional leeway than if you're just choosing to go on vacation to Montana versus your mom gets sick in Florida, that they're treated differently to account for some of those reasons.
Right. Okay. I'd just be curious to find that out, just so we have a little more control from a timing perspective. So we know for staffing purposes and all of that. Eric, questions on this?
Just so I understand, so if someone were to go to their cousin's wedding in Vermont, in theory, they're going to have to now social distance, which is defined as staying home, for the next 14 days. So that if they were teaching, they wouldn't be able to come to the school. Is that correct?
Depending on those exact circumstances, potentially, but there is the option of getting tested.
Yes, okay.
That is not a problem. If you come back with a negative test, you can return to work. And again, there'd be a difference if that wedding was in Vermont versus that wedding was in Montana.
Yeah, I'm assuming
using
it's
the Montana analogy,
yeah.
but
The other thing, Mr. Chairman, and this is purely housekeeping, but I don't think we actually took a motion or a second on any of these policies. They were just presented and we talked about it, then we voted.
Okay.
So I'll correct that by moving to approve all 4 policies as a group.
Thank you, Eric.
Second.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Arthur. So for official purposes, let me go back through and get a vote on all of those. Mary
That would
Beth Berry.
include this one. That's including this one.
All right, so we'll wait for discussion on this one then. Right?
No,
Because we have the motion and the second?
right, but yeah, complete discussion on this one.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Thank you for keeping me in line. You are you are Mr. Roberts rules, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Eric?
No, I'm good.
And I'll just add, I think what Keith said, the difference is whether or not the place they're traveling to is on the approved travel list from the state of Massachusetts or not. And that's what makes the difference. Mary Beth?
No other questions. Are we voting?
After discussion.
Okay, no other questions.
Okay. Jeff?
No other questions.
Arthur?
Nope, good.
Now we're voting. Mary Beth Berry?
Yes.
Jeff K?
Yes.
Arthur Skarmas?
Yes.
Eric Crane?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So the travel motion, the travel policy, as well as the other 3 policies we discussed, now all officially pass. Thank you, Eric.
Sure.
And because I'm on my phone now, I do not have the agenda in front of me. I believe that was the end of the meeting. Was there anything else,
It
Lisa?
is.
That okay. Thank you, and thank you for bearing with my technology issues. So I need my favorite motion of the night then.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
That took much longer than I expected. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjourning. Eric Crane,
Yes.
Mary Beth Ferry,
Yes.
Jeff Kay,
Yes.
Arthur Skamras.
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Thank you all for your participation and really thoughtful discussion tonight. It's much appreciated. And good night, Danvers.
Right.
Night. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.